Hello there and welcome to another edition of the Robot Wars tier list rankings. Now, if you've seen these tier list rankings before, you already know the gist of it. But for those that have never seen it before, basically I'm going to go through every single competitor from every single series of Robot Wars and basically rank them from S to, well, Jokebot technically. Well, S to F if you really want to be pedantic. So the S tier obviously is the best of the best. They're the greatest robots. They're the ones that are fantastic from beginning to end. A tier are really good robots. Obviously, they're not as good as S tier necessarily, but they're still, right up there. B tier are the robots that have a little bit of, quite obvious flaws, but they're still really good. They're still fantastic in the shows they're in. C tier is pretty average. They got a decent design, they got decent effectiveness, but they're not particularly memorable. Speaking of the great designs, you got a great design but poor functionality. These are the robots which are really, in terms of design, they visually look fantastic. So, for example, you have some robots that are based on animals and they look fantastic, but their effectiveness is zilch. Similarly, you got great functionality but very poor design. So a robot that is basically like a grey box, is really good, but its design sucks. It's just a grey box. D tier are the below average robots. They are not so, enticing necessarily. They're the ones that you kind of forget about. And you got the F tier, I meant. I'm jumping aboard a bit. F tier, they are the worst of the worst. They're the robots who just suck. They're the ones that there's almost no redeemable factor to them at all. They're awful in terms of functionality. They're awful in terms of design. They're just shit. And then you got Jokebots. These are the ones that are there because they're just there to be made fun of. They're the robots which you don't take seriously whatsoever. They're there, to basically get destroyed and thrashed and then thrown away. I don't know what else to say. They're Jokebots, They get their own category because really they don't fit on the S to F tier necessarily because, well, it's a bit hard to classify a Jokebot as, a good robot because more often than not they're made just to be, taking the piss out of, really. So, without further ado, this is the ranking of the fifth Wars. This is the fifth series of Robot Wars, the UK Championship. And, well, starting off the ranking is once again 101. 101 seems to always be the first robot because, its name is literally 101. And 101, I still think the design is great. It's a very simplified design. The tracks, obviously, the zigzag patterning on the side. I love it. It's got little bits on the front as well. These little what are they called? What are they called? The little wedges. That's right. Little wedges on the front for this series. 101 didn't do well. It lost in the first round. It was defeated by Fluffy. Fluffy literally tore off the track, but it still functioned surprisingly. So, it really does show you how well engineered 101 is. 101 is out of date by this point, compared to how it was in like Series 3 or even Series 4, where it was really good. 101, by this point, it is outdated. Robots are a lot more powerful. We started seeing this outdatedness during Extreme 1, which technically was filmed around the same time. It's no wonder that they went with Anarchy next year because obviously, 101, it wasn't doing so hot. That said, it still functioned. It still functioned despite losing a track. It still, survived, so to speak. It didn't really do well surviving, but it still survived. And I still think its design is decent. So I think this is a B tier. This is a solid B tier. It's not the greatest robot in the world, but it's still a really good robot. It's still a wonderful robot. It's an all-star robot. Everyone knows who 101 is. Up next is 13 Black. This is its debut. The team debuted back in Series 2, but this is their first appearance with 13 Black, perhaps their most famous machine. 13 Black did not do well. It lost in the first round once again, like 101. And 13 Black, in terms of design, I think the design is pretty cool. Obviously the two discs, the two flywheels, I think it's lovely. I think the color scheme as well for the Series 5 13 Black is quite underrated. I like the more blocky sort of bright red colors and the bright sort of glossy green it has. The black as well stands out. It really does stand out visually in design, in terms of the colors and the design, etc. Very good looking robot. In terms of functionality, however, in terms of effectiveness, it was not very effective. It was how do I put it? Its disc didn't do much damage, and it died more or less after one hit, and it was, not the most well controlled in the world, which is a shame because I think design wise this is fantastic. This is a good example of a great design, but the functionality sucks. And obviously 13 Black does improve next year in Series 6 and Extreme 2. It's much better. But as a start, this is not the greatest start in the world. Great design, but the functionality is pretty shit. Free Stegs to Heaven. Now, Free Stegs to Heaven has a little bit of an interesting history because for years, everyone, including myself, even the show, would spell it Free Stegs to Heaven with T-O-2. Not 2 as in the number 2, but the actual spelling of it is Free Stegs 2 with the number 2, Heaven. Which is easily one of the worst fucking names I've ever seen, and I don't understand why anyone would see that and think that's good, at all. I'm kind of glad the show changed the name because the name looks better like Free Stegs to Heaven. But oddity around the name aside, the robot itself, a lot of people really don't like Free Stegs to Heaven compared to its predecessors. Stegosaurus was an amazing robot in Series 3. It was a fantastic Rambot. Got to the grand final. Steg 2, a lot of people give it a lot of hype. It had the powerful flip. It was it had that lovely Perspex where you can see the inside. I always love robots that look like that. And, the flipper seemed quite powerful when it got into gear. But Free Stegs to Heaven didn't really impress a lot of people. It didn't really seem as good as the other two. And it sometimes is seen as the black sheep of the family. Now, all things considered, Free Stegs to Heaven isn't the greatest. Its blade, it was pretty damaging, to be fair. When it got into gear, it was able to, shred and slice, which was quite nice. And the design, the design is functional. It is a decent design. But at the same time, it's just, I don't know. It's one of those robots which is quite hard to judge because I feel like in a better heat, it could have done well, and it could have, if it got to the semi-final, I think people's perspective of this particular Steg machine would have been a lot more positive. But because it only got to the heat final, and it was pretty naff in Extreme 1 as well, it's got this reputation of being a really shit robot one. It's not a shit robot, it's just a mediocre sort of robot. It's not, I wouldn't say it's D tier, I wouldn't say it's F tier either. I feel like Free Stegs to Heaven is a C tier robot. It's very average. It's very much a average robot, which I think is decent, but I think if it had a few fixes here and there, it could have been a lot better. If the blade was, it didn't get stuck on everything. If it was a little bit more faster as well, it seemed quite slow and sluggish in its battles. If its invertibility was a little bit better, maybe. I don't know. I feel like Free Stegs to Heaven could have been a little bit better. Up next is Beast. Obviously, its name is spelt, 8345T? I think that's what it's actually called, but Beast. The first Beast to appear in the series. We, of course, Beast, from this point on, basically appears in every series, I believe. No, it doesn't appear in Series 6. So, actually, no, I lied about that. It doesn't appear in Series 6 or Extreme 2. It appears in Series 7 and Series 8, but first version of Beast, very tall looking robot, a very unique robot as well, in the sense that it has a flipper and an axe. It's flips and axes from both ends, really. The color scheme, I quite like the flame effect. I won't lie, I like the little logo as well. I think the use of the numbers for the name is really, creative, even if, at the end of the day, you're just going to call it Beast, because it is, Beast. Its design is unique. It's not the greatest design in the world, I'm not going to lie. And I don't think, it was very functional necessarily. It did win its first battle and then it lost the second one, but, it's the type of robot that if you flipped it over, it wouldn't be able to self-right. And it's got a flipper. And it can't self-right, Do you get what I'm trying to say? Its flipper wasn't the best. Its axe doesn't really work. Its axe is pathetic. I almost feel like the team should have just not done with the axe. And of course, later on down the line, they did get rid of the axe completely because, and especially during the live shows, they got rid of the axe. Because, let's be honest, the axe just was not useful. It wasn't very functional. It didn't really do anything. The flip, on the other hand, did do a lot of things. It did do a lot of things. It did do things. I should say, it did do anything. I guess you could say argue. I don't know where I was going with that, but I think Beast is a tricky one to rank as well. It's this is why I have the C tier, because the C tier is there for the robots which I really don't know what to say, because they're not terribly designed, but they're not terribly functional either. And I feel like Beast is one of those robots where the functionality is not the greatest, but it's not the worst, and its design is not terrible, but it's not brilliant either. It's there with Free Stegs, but I feel like Free Stegs has a lot more, oomph to it. Up next is Atomic. Atomic is a fantastic robot. And, when you hear the stories about how it did in the qualifiers, where it was able to throw robots out the arena, where it was this brutal machine, and then you see it in the arena, and, you see glimpses of that when it throws over the likes of, Mousetrap and Fighting Talk, and then, of course, throwing over Can Open in Series 5 in particular. It even was, like, the only robot to throw Hypno-Disc over, forcing it to use its self-righting mechanism. No other robot did that. Atomic has a lot of pedigree. Unfortunately, and as you just kind of gathered, it did face Hypno-Disc, and once it faced Hypno-Disc, it was just shredded to pieces. It's a shame that they did that. I think it's also equally a shame that they kind of swapped the battles around, because if I recall, Atomic was seeded. And the way the seeding system should work, if there's two seeds in a heat, is both seeds are usually kept apart, so that the idea is they have to fight in the heat final. And for some reason in Series 5, they decided to put Hypno-Disc and Atomic against each other in round 2, which meant that poor Atomic didn't really get more of a chance to shine, which sucks in my opinion, because I really love Atomic. I love the design. I think when you see it in action, it's really fantastic. And we do see in Series 7, its full capabilities. It just sucks that it just didn't do brilliantly, or didn't do as well here because of circumstances. So whilst Atomic did lose in the second round, I think because it's such a fantastic machine, the flipping power, the design and all that, obviously it was quite weak, to spinners, but it still goes into A tier because it's just a fantastic machine, isn't it? Fantastic little thing. Up next is Axor. Axor is one of the more unique of the iron ore machines. For one thing, it's called Axor. It's not called iron ore. But it's the one that started off the trend of having an axe and a flipper at the same time, which iron ore would eventually do. And I really love the barrel body. I think the design of Axel is great. And in terms of functionality, Axel actually wasn't too bad. We saw in Extreme 1, it's still able to deliver an axe hit on a panic attack, and it was still surviving the matches. It survived its match arguably against Really Big Cheese before it was thrown out in like 2 seconds. But still, if it was a lot more longer drawn out fight, I do think that Axel probably would have done decently. It would have survived the match, a little bit better, but obviously in that fight it just got thrown out. And the highest flip as well, Axel. I wonder what it was like seeing it in the air in the control pod, like basically seeing this robot all the way up there. The perspective must have been amazing. So yeah, Axel, design-wise, I think Axel was great. I love the red look of it. I love the barrel body. I love the design of the logo as well. I love the face. I love the look of Axel. Functionality, it was pretty decent. Obviously, it was put up against Granny's Revenge and 2 All-Star robots in Panic Attack and Wheelie Big Cheese. In the Granny's Revenge match, well, I mean, it's a joke bot. What are you going to say? What can you do in that fight? Although, saying that, it did deliver an axe hit, like, almost perfectly, like, precisely onto the wheels, onto the tires of Granny's Revenge, which is just, that's really good. Although it is shocking that they didn't flip Granny's Revenge over. I think they were just too busy toying with it, really. But I digress. Like, I think if those All-Star fights, the All-Star fight against, not All-Star fight, the fight against Wheelie Big Cheese in round 2, if it had gone a little bit further, if it didn't just get chucked out straight away, I feel like it could have actually done a little bit better. It would have actually survived a little bit longer. Ultimately, it did go flying out the arena. But I still think Axel does work. And I think, Axel does deserve a B tier at the very least, because I think, it had that potential. And I think design-wise, it's fantastic. I think the look of it is fantastic. Really good-looking robot. Up next is Accident. Accident. Functionality-wise, absolute zero. It barely worked, and it died from a little tap. That's an immediate red flag for any robot. It's an immediate red flag for, any competitor, really. If your robot dies in one hit, and it's a very slight tap, you've not got a good robot. Design-wise, it's a very ugly-looking machine as well. It's I don't know how to describe it. It's like a big blue and grey box. It doesn't look great. The spinning hammers, I do think as a weapon is kind of interesting, but it just didn't work. If it had better design, better functionality, better reliability, it probably would have been more interesting. But from what we got, it was pretty shit. I gotta be honest, it was pretty shit. And really, it's just not a very good robot. I will give it the benefit of doubt. I'll put it in D tier, because I don't think it's necessarily F tier necessarily. It's touching on F tier, but it's on D tier mainly because the weaponry does look like it probably could have packed a punch. And who knows, maybe in the qualifiers it did some really amazing amount of destruction. Obviously we don't know, but it is an interesting robot in that respect, in the sense of what could have been or what it might have been. That's the thing, it's the potential. That's why it's in D. It's got the potential. Up next is Barbarus. This is the first Barbarus machine. Barbarus, it's a very weird looking robot in Series 5, I'm not gonna lie. Usually in Robot Wars, Barbarus was this long pole, basically. A long barber's pole. And it was, it looks amazing. But the Series 5 version is really weird. It's got these little, it's really small, the drum blade. And it's got the wheels that stick out, and they're paper thin. And obviously the wheels are paper thin on the later versions as well. But they have front wheels as well, attached to these bright yellow things. It's the design is there, and it was capable of breaking Panic Attack's forks. So it definitely has the functionality there. I don't know. It's the design is really weird. It's obviously later versions are really, really beautifully designed and really well made, and were, in my opinion, a lot more devastating. This one, not so much. I don't know. The design is what gets to me. The design seems really off-putting. I think it's because I'm so used to the later versions of Barbarus, which looks so much better, that this design just doesn't look very good. I have to be honest, it's going to go in great functionality, but poor design, because it's just the design is just really off-putting. It is so off-putting. The look of it is so weird. And, even then, you got that question, how the hell are they going to actually go in and smash other robots? In the sense of, how do I put it? In the sense that, those little front things are just going to get in the way. So it has a very narrow space of attack unless it reverses into something, I don't know, I feel like Barbarus's design kind of was a bit of a flaw in it. There's a reason why they got rid of it later on, I feel. Alright, so up next is Decapitator. Now, Decapitator, I don't know whether to put this as a joke bot or not. Now, you're going to see this with a few other robots as well, because Series 5 had a lot of these weird robots, per se, in the sense that, are they joke bots, or were they actually meant to be a serious competitor? And Decapitator is one of those robots, because the look of it, it doesn't look very functional. The design is fantastic, even if it isn't orange bee for some reason. I never really understood why it was orange, I'll be honest. It's meant to be a bee. Sure, it should have been yellow. Hey-ho. Design-wise, it is, it's got a funky design. I think the design is great. I do genuinely think the design is great, but at the same time, functionality-wise, it's got this tiny, long drill that doesn't seem to do anything, or it doesn't seem like it could do anything. And so, I don't know, I don't think that's a very, brilliant, effective robot. And I don't think it was meant to be, because I feel like this is a joke bot. I do think this was meant to be in there just for fun. Of course, we see it doesn't last long against Firestorm. And, like, even the boggle eyes and all that. Like, I feel like Becapitate is a joke bot. I'm going to put it in the joke bot category because, I do like it. I like it in a weird way. It's a cute robot. I think it's great. But I don't think it was meant to be taken seriously. Like, you look at the boggle eyes, you look at the ineffective drill, you look at the way it's designed, I don't think it's meant to be effective. I don't think it's meant to be effective. I don't think it's meant to win a battle. And if it did, it was going to be a shock if it did. It does make you wonder what would happen if they did have melees in this series. Because, like, imagine if that thing got through. That would be interesting. Oh, anyways. Next up is Behemoth, an all-star machine Behemoth. Series 5, is really where Behemoth's bad luck really starts to rear its ugly head a bit. Because, you see it in Series 4. Series 4, it did have a lot of reliability problems. Like, it did sort of break down a few times. But it's still pretty effective. Series 3, it was really good machine. It just couldn't self-right. And it was let down by, circumstantial, battles, like it was Fort Razor, for example. Series 5, on the other hand, it's the same with the Extreme 1 version. It's a very functional machine. It did do decently when it could fight decently. But if it was up against a robot which it couldn't really handle, that's where it's, issues started to come about. And you see this with Crustacean, because Crustacean is such an awkward robot. It's got these claws as well that could easily grab like the self-righting mechanisms or the sides and push it anywhere. And so I feel like that's exactly what's happened with Behemoth. Like, this is where like the problems start to rear its ugly head. I feel like this is where Behemoth's like bad luck truly starts to shine. And I feel like it is a functional robot. It did function well. Its design is great as well. I think the little axe is just an additional bonus. I love the way it sort of like hooks onto robots sometimes, or just delivers that extra blow. It is a fun little gimmick in a way. And its fight against Supernova is a very interesting fight to observe, because Supernova did destroy Behemoth, but Behemoth still fought on. It still survived. It still managed to do well. I feel like Behemoth in Series 5 was good enough to be in the A tier. I feel like it's a similar circumstance with Atomic, where really good robot, just kind of let down by circumstance, really. So let down by the battles it was in, I guess that's the way I'd look at it. Up next is Big Nipper. This is the first version of Big Nipper. Now, this is an interesting robot to look at, because later versions of Big Nipper, I absolutely love Big Nipper. I think it's such a beautiful, well-designed, fantastic robot. And the first version is this ugly brick. It really is. Like, the first Series 5 version is just not the most appealing looking Big Nipper out there. But you can still see the, how do I put it? You see these sort of like blueprints of the Big Nipper that will appear later on, with the, lifter claw mechanism. Obviously, the claw lifter isn't brilliant. That said, it still managed to, break Razor's wing in its only battle, which is a really impressive feat. But in terms of design, it just looked very weak. I feel like if it was up against a much better or much easier machine, it probably would have done decently. But against like Razor, it just wasn't, and it's not the most visually appealing design either. It's literally just a grey brick, basically. It's a grey brick with little like pincers on it. Pincers that don't really look like they could do an awful lot in under more restricted circumstances, like against Razor. So it does kind of pain me to do this, but I'm gonna have to put Big Nipper in D. Like, Big Nipper, I love it. I genuinely love it. But and there is potential there, and we do see the potential it does have later on. That said, it's just not a good robot in Series 5. Its design is just very ugly and not very good looking. Its pincers didn't seem to be the most effective. Its weaponry didn't seem like it would be much of a match. And maybe if it was up against like more easier machines to deal with, it probably could have done better. I don't know. It's just, yeah, I don't know. Okay, so up next is Bigger Brother, the runners-up of Series 5, the one that came second overall. Bigger Brother is a massive improvement. Like, you look at it in Series 4, had this, like, really pathetic flipper. Let's be perfectly honest now. It was, like, this sort of, like, sort of flipper. It didn't really do anything. It was more like a lifter, if you really want to call it that. And in Extreme 1, it was really unreliable. It just didn't do much. It just kind of broke down and died, and yeah, it was kind of useless. But in Series 5, I don't know, like, I know that Series 5 and Extreme 1 were filmed at the same time. So it makes you wonder, like, why it just didn't work in Extreme 1, but worked magnificently in Series 5. Like, I don't know, like, did they, like, keep all the good batteries, all the good motors, everything, for the main championship and just use leftovers to the Extreme? I don't know. It's very interesting given that it was filmed at the same time, although maybe they did all the main championship stuff first for their end and then did the, I don't know, like, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe, like, I'm just thinking of theories here now. I don't know the true filming chronology. I know a bit of it. Like, I know there's one day they did, like, a heat of Dutch Robot Wars, and they did a mayhem, and then they did the Annihilator, like, afterwards, which was interesting. But yeah, Bigger Brother but I digress. The Bigger Brother in Series 5 is a powerhouse. This is a fantastic machine. Like I said, you look at it in Series 4, it was kind of pathetic, not going to lie. In Extreme 1, it was, once again, really unreliable and didn't do all that much. So if you're watching this from the perspective of, like, this is Bigger Brother, this is what it did in, Series 4, this is what it did in Extreme 1, this is what it did in Series 3, for example, where it was just kind of a race car, more or less, with a wedge. It's shocking to see just how good it got here. And it is a massive improvement. And I always thought the design is kind of cool as well. The more rusted design, the weird looking flipper as well, with the little spikes at the front and the way it's wedged out. I've always found the design fascinating. The angles and all that. Yeah, like, this is an S-tier robot. By far, this is an S-tier robot. It's massively improved from last time. Massively, got great design, great power, everything. This is a good robot. Really good robot. And there's a reason why it came second. Up next is Black Widow, and this is another example of, is it a joke bot or not? Because the problem with Series 5 is that it really didn't like doing team interviews or team bits necessarily. So, like, you look at all the other seasons, Series 3 and 4 in particular, they always dedicate time to talk to the teams. There'll be no music. It would just be the pit reporter talking to them. It would be just, talking about the robots, talking about how they're functional. Here's, what we did to improve it. Here's, what we're doing. And maybe, you'll get an insight. Okay, these guys are jokers. Like, they're clearly not, taking it seriously. You look at Sir Chromalot, for example, or even Plunderbird, for example, they're not taking it seriously. They're there to have fun. But with Series 5, there was none of that. You didn't get any of those team reviews until after round 2. And even then, it was like just a very quick, introduction, which you should have had, like, after the stats board. Like, Series 5 is really weirdly edited. I don't really like the way Series 5 is formatted at all. I think it's really shitty, honestly. And so Black Widow falls in that category as well. They do have jackets like Deertool, though, when you see them in the control pod. The furry jackets. Except, of course, they have, like, a bee stripy one, which is weird, because you think they'd have, like, a black one or, like, a red one, maybe, for, like, the Black Widow logo. I don't know. But I think Black Widow might be classed as a joke bot. But then saying that, you see it in techno games, and in techno games it was a serious competitor. And it actually did really well in techno games. Like, if you see its comparison between this and Robles, like in techno games, I think it was like a semi-finalist in like the Walker event, the sprint event. It shows to show that, in something like techno games, Black Widow is a really well-made robot. And I do think that the axe did look like it had a lot of punch to it. Like the way it swung down onto Hypno-Disc, like it did look like it may have packed a punch. Like it may have packed like a punch if it was given like a easy opponent, so to speak. If it was given like a very simple opponent to fight, I feel like it probably could have won a fight. I'm not gonna lie, but I do think that this is probably a joke bot, because you look at it, it's there to just be sacrificed to Hypno-Disc. Let's be perfectly honest. It's got all these webbing. It's got this, like, I don't know. I feel like this is a joke bot. And I might be wrong in thinking that, but I don't know. I like it more than Becapitate. I think the design of it is fantastic. I love the Walker spider legs. I actually think the Techno Games one looks actually better, funnily enough. Mainly because it actually has like 8 legs and it looks more spidery with the big bulby end and all that. Yeah. So up next is Bot Outta Hell. This is Team Talk's second machine. They got 2 machines in their series. They got Hippopotamus, and they got this one. Bot Out of Hell, I love the design of it. I think the design is really creative. It's like, there was a 90s US competitor. It was, I'm trying to remember its name. Andy Royd, that's his name. It was called Andy Royd. It was this doll on this like little tricycle. And it reminds me of that. Except this is like a skeleton on like a tricycle, and the front wheel is a big flywheel. I love the design of this robot. I think the design is fantastic. This is like a 10 out of 10 design almost. Well, okay, maybe not 10 out of 10. Maybe 8 out of 10, but still, it's a great design. However, functionally, it was not great. Its flywheel didn't look like it could do awful much. Like it just looked like it was a type of robot where, the flywheel looked like it could just maybe scratch or stop every time it just smacked something. But at the same time, it could easily be flipped over, and it's back end, it's exposed wheels, and it just has all these problems where, I don't know, you just have all these issues that are clearly, there, and obviously it does just get flicked over by reactor straight away, more or less, so it's not brilliant. So in terms of functionality, it sucks, but in terms of design, this is fantastic. Absolutely fantastic design. Really great design, but really poor functionally. Up next is Bulldog Breed 3, or Bulldog Breed for shorts. Bulldog Breed is greatly improved from Series 4 and Series 3 for that matter. Series 3, it was just this boxy robot with saw blades. It died before even Activate was even activated, basically. It was a dead robot standing. And RoboPig just pushed it about, and that was it. In Series 4, it got to the Heat Finals. It was battered to death by Stinger. But you saw the potential of what Bulldog Breed could do, a flipper and all that. Here, the flipper is greatly improved, and I think the design is fantastic. I love the bumpiness of the design as well. Like, I love the little bumpiness. I don't know how to describe it. I just think that looks great. I love the look of the flipper as well, the T-shaped flipper. I love how it just throws robots up, and it's not powerful like Bigger Brother or Chaos 2 or Thermidor or anything like that, but it's still got power to it, and it's still able to do bulldoze and be aggressive. I love the look of it, and I love the Union Jack with a big muscular bulldog on front. I think it's great. This is the last time we're ever going to see that, really, because Series 6 and 7, they just have the big bulldog on the front and the Union Jack, or bulldog face on the front, I should say, which kind of sucks, because I think it had a lot more character when it was like that big beefy bulldog, that you see in and Series 4 and 5. And I love the look of this one. It is a very shiny robot as well. Design-wise, it's great. Functionality, it's great. This is an A-tier robot. There's a reason why it was a Heat finalist. You know, I think under better circumstances, it probably could have won a Heat. You know, obviously, it was up against Hypno-Disc. It had no chance. It had no chance. Okay, so the reigning champion is next. The first of the season, in fact. Chaos 2. Chaos 2. Chaos 2 has not really changed at all. You know, you look at it compared to like all the other previous versions, it's not changed. And, you know, it's both a detriment and a advantage. You see this in Extreme 1 in particular, where, you know, the design has not changed, and as the robots have slowly become more powerful, you know, it's getting a bit, you know, you kind of need to adapt a bit more, a bit better, so to speak. You know, Tornado in Extreme 1 just ran amok and just shredded the front of it. Now, to be fair, in Extreme 1, it actually did pretty decently. And even in Series 5, it did decently. It still got, you know, to the second round, the semi-final. And, you know, you just saw the way it brutalizes and flips robots all over the place. And it's really just let down by, well, robots being more powerful than it, you know. And ironically, the robot that it loses to is Bigger Brother, a robot where previously it was not the best, but it's improved, and it's improved to the point that it's able to beat out the two-time reigning champion. And I you know, even if Chaos 2 won, I don't think Chaos 2 would have won the series. You know, even if Chaos 2 won that fight, I don't think it would have won the series. And, you know, to be fair, it did lose under very circumstantial reasons. Like, it basically all the gas ran out, you know, if you've never seen it. And so Chaos 2, you know, despite all of that, was still really powerful. And sure, in its heat, it was given relatively easy opponents. You know, Storm Force wasn't that difficult to deal with. You know, the Steel Avenger probably wouldn't have caused much harm unless it gave a real nasty axe hit across the back. And S.M.I.D.S.Y was a little bit more difficult, but even then, S.M.I.D.S.Y, you know, is still not the most reliable machine in the world. So, you know, Chaos 2 did have a rather easy run in its heats. The semi-finals, again, you know, it wasn't, you know, phased necessarily. You know, it had a much tougher run, especially with Wild Thing. Wild Thing's fight with Chaos 2 is easily one of the best matches ever. In fact, it's quite possibly the best match of Series 5 in general. And George Francis has even said it's his favourite match ever in Royal Wars. And so, I you know, there is that side of things. And I do think that, you know, Chaos 2 did decently against Big Brother. And I feel like had it not run out of gas and the fight continued, it could have gone either way, really. You know, it really was, unfortunately, just circumstantial reasons. So, you know, even despite that, I feel like Chaos 2 is still an S tier robot. I love the look of Chaos 2. And personally, I do find it better than Bigger Brother. But, yeah, like, I don't know what it is. Like, Chaos 2 has a very simple design, all things considered. Because it is just, you know, it's got high ground clearance. Its flipper is like that. It's basically just a black robot with red text. But there's something just about that design that looks so sleek and so cool and so gorgeous. And like even the official photo there with the little white light like gleaming from the and reflecting from the logo, it's just so beautiful. And I love the roundness of it. And the back end which is exposed, I love that. I love that Perspex armor. I'm a sucker for it. I've always said, you know, I love that sort of plastic Perspex look for robots. But yeah, even like despite the fact that it is getting a little bit outdated now, it's still able to kick ass. Like this isn't like Series 6 or Extreme 2 where it is so outdated that it's just getting mutilated. You know, here it's actually still really functional and still really cool. Okay, so up next is Claude Hopper. Claude Hopper is the first walker to win a battle, supposedly. If you discount the walker battles beforehand and Miss Struts, I believe. Was it Miss Struts or was it Jim Struts in Series 2's grudge match battle? I don't remember. But it's the first one to win a battle in the main championship. That was a walker. Mind you, it was up against Twister, which was dead on arrival. So, yeah. Claude Hopper, design-wise, I think the design is great. I love the more, you know, grasshoppery look to it, the green look of it. And I love the roll bars it has to try and protect it from being flipped. It didn't face a flipper this time, and I do like that they do try to improve from its design last time, especially with the little drum blades across the side. I think that's quite a unique weapon, even if it is pretty ineffective. And I think that's basically what I gotta say about it. You know, it was able to walk well, and it was able to survive the match against Pussycat, arguably. You know, Clawed Arbor does function, and it does look great. I think this is a C tier robot, just because, and I'm going to put it above Beast, personally speaking, because it is a functional robot. It is a good-looking robot. It's just not the greatest robot in the world. You know, this isn't a robot which you'll go like, oh, okay, yeah, you know, you're going to remember this forever and ever, you know. Yeah. Up next is Corkscrew. This is the first version of Corkscrew, to be precise. And despite it being the first version, it's actually the most successful version. It got to the heat final, and it got to the heat final by very repetitive means. I don't know how else to describe it. Basically, in all of its fights, it would spin into the opponent, get stuck to it, and it would be stuck to that opponent for the whole fight. Rinse and repeat. There's a reason why I absolutely detest Heat F of Series 5. It is one of the most boring heats ever, and Corkscrew is to blame. That said, design-wise, I think it's fantastic. I love the literal corkscrew sticking out of it, the little design there. I love the spinner capabilities, and I love the kilt that it has. Even if I do think the kilt does become a detriment to its own functionality, and its functionality was not the best. Like, it's not like the later versions of Corkscrew where, you know, even though it didn't do as well later on, its design was pretty powerful. It was able to just smash into your opponents quickly. It was able to just tear into them. It was brutal. But this one, not so much. You know, I don't think this one's that good in terms of functionality. In fact, I think it's pretty shit. It's shocking just how repetitive its fights are, where it just goes into an opponent, gets stuck, and can't seem to spin up again. And if it is freed, it doesn't spin up again. You know, it's a great design, but its functionality is poor, very poor. You know, that's why I'm going to put it right there. Great design, but poor functionality. And ironically, it's up there with 13 Black. All right, so up next is Crush Station. Crush Station, a wonderful robot. This is its debut, and what a fantastic debut it had. You know, the way it just picks apart with Robo Chicken at first in that back and forth battle, and then it's the Behemoth match. The Behemoth match in particular is the one which I love. You know, the way it was able to just grab on and just push into the pits. I love the control there. You know, when robots are really controlled well, I almost orgasm because it's so wonderful. That's a really disturbing thing to say, but you know what I mean. And Crustacean is one of those robots, and even the Heat Final was great. You know, I love this robot. I really do. I love the design of it. I love the crab-like look of it. I love the weapons. I love the way the weapons work as well, the gloves. I think that's such a cool, unique way to control a robot. You know, I love the pun as well. Crush Station. You know, I think that's just so great. Crush Station, honestly, you know, in a better heat and a better circumstance, it could have won a heat. It could have won something, you know. And it does indeed, you know, if we skip ahead to Dutch Series 2, you know, we do know that it does indeed get to a grand final in that sense. And I don't know, like, if it was in a better circumstance, it probably would have been a semi-finalist. And you never know, it could have even been a grand finalist. Like, I'm actually putting this in S tier. I think Crustacean is truly a magnificent robot. Up next is Derek. Now, Derek is rather interesting because Derek, for those that know, and for those that don't know, I should say, basically Derek is a robot which won the best engineering award, and a lot of people are always shocked that Derek, the robot that lost in round one after just being axed a few times by Dominator, won the best engineered award. So clearly there's something behind the scenes with Derek that made it such a great machine. And we do know that the Series 6 version is somewhat underrated in a way, because the Series 6 version, that is actually quite a good machine from the short time that we see it. But the Series 5 version, you don't really get that. I know this is meant to be an engineering marvel, but Derek? Derek is just, I don't know, like, I kind of want to see what Derek was capable of. I want to see its qualifiers. I want to see, it out of the war zone or doing something, outside the series, and showing the Series 5 version how good and functional it was, because clearly there was something behind the scenes there, something that really made this machine win that reward. And the rewards, by the way, were mostly done by the Roboteers, who all collectively agreed that Derek is the best engineered robot of the series. So something is there with Derek. But you look at it and it doesn't look like it would. Like, it's a grey box with a lifter that doesn't seem to work in its match, and a flywheel, if I recall, at the back end. Derek is, I don't know. I kind of want to see more of Derek. Like, I really want to see more of Derek to make a full judgment, because I'll be honest, I don't know what else to say. Derek, I don't know. Derek is, I'm going to put it into D tier, and I know that might be controversial, but I say it's controversial. We didn't really get to see Derek all that much, but, like, I feel like if we saw more of Derek, and we saw why it won the Best Engineering Award, maybe, just maybe Derek would have been a better robot, a better machine, a better judged machine. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. Like, Derek is an enigma. It is a enigma of a robot, and yet I am fascinated by this machine. I am so fascinated by it. I do think, though, and spoiler alert for when the Series 6 ranking ever comes out, whenever that is, probably 2 years' time or so, unless I'm dead. But, unless whenever that one comes out, the Series 6 ranking, I will say this, the Series 6 Derek will be much higher than D, because despite the few seconds we see it, it was a good robot. But the Series 5 one, we saw a lot longer of, and it wasn't so good. So up next is Destructible, and Destructible is a joke bot. Like, let's not kid ourselves, it is a joke bot. I love Destructible. I've always loved it, ever since I was a kid. It's always been one of my favorite joke bots. It probably is my favorite joke bot personally. Like, I know, everyone says, oh, well, what about Deator? What about, Plunderbird and all that? I always like to rank Deator and Plunderbird as proper competitors, even despite the fact that they are joke bots themselves. But Destructible, like, I just love this robot. I love the big bulbous look of it. The grand scale of it, the little face, the big face on it. I do think the Series 4 version was better, though. I think the spike being the tongue is great. But this one won a battle. This one won against Accident, which isn't really hard to do. And, it's... I love the little cap as well, the little cap on top. I genuinely love Destructible, and it sucks that it doesn't reappear in the series. But we do know about its Series 6 qualifier. In fact, it fought 2 qualifiers, but we know one of them, which it actually survived the fight against Dantomkia. Like, it was thrown about and just rolled back onto its wheels. I would love to see that fight. Like, especially given the fact that, like, Iron Ore and Maximus were just thrown about and thrown out, but Destructible just stayed in and kept fighting with Dantomkia, and somehow it did not qualify, which sucks dick. Really does, because I really love Destructible, and it is my favorite joke bot. It is a joke bot. It isn't there to be serious at all. I do prefer the Series 4 version, and the Series 6 version would have been even better because it had a little skirt and had the little arms as well. But still, you can't go wrong with the bubble. All right, up next is Deator. Now, as I just mentioned with the Destructible quip, I don't necessarily rank Deator, Plunderbird, or Sir Chromalot with the joke bots, because for all intents and purposes, yes, they are technically joke bots. They should all be in the joke bot category. They shouldn't really be anywhere else. But I always like to consider them apart with the main group because they are really big all-star machines, and they are they it's hard to describe, but I don't really want to put them in the joke bot category, though technically they should. But because they are such all-star machines, because they have fought so long and fight legitimate battles, and they are big time contenders, I put them in the main bits. And Deator in Series 5, a lot of people love this Series 5 Deator. It is the one that a lot of people will make replicas of. There's an outweight one, there's a featherweight one, and it's all based on the Series 5 version with the big scoop. No one seems to care about the other ones, even though, arguably the other Deators were somewhat more successful. Series 3 in particular, probably the most successful Deator. But Series 5's Extreme 1's Deator is definitely up there in terms of success. It really was a good robot. The scoop, the wider flipper blade, I think, is the big benefit. And of course, this Deator did defeat Tornado. Though Tornado lost because the fur got snagged into the drum and killed the motors, But I digress. Deator, I love the look of Deator. I think it's a great robot. Do I prefer the old Deator with the long lifter arm that looked like a big nose? Kinda. I do kind of prefer that, especially when you look at this Deator. On certain angles, this Deator looks very weird. But I don't know about you, but it just looks very weird. But at the same time, I think this Deator is so memorable. This Deator is so fun and so good. It's just a shame that it, had a very easy battle first time round, and then a very good battle second time round, and got flipped over straight around in the third. Still, this Deator is good. This Deator is still wonderful in every sense of the word. It's in B tier because it isn't the most functional machine. It is still quite slow. It can't self-right still. But, again, it's still fun. It's still great. It's got the scoop, which actually is much better in terms of effectiveness. And if you played the video game Extreme Destruction on PC, or even on Xbox back in the day, this Deator was an absolute beast. It actually really was really good. Holy shit, it's good. Unless you count fire, then you glitch out on the armor. Yeah. Up next is Dome. This is the robot that Deator defeated in round 1. Dome defeated Vader in the qualifiers. This is a qualifier that is available online. You can actually watch it anytime, anywhere. I initially uploaded a clip of this qualifier, but Team Vader very recently came back to the limelight, and they actually uploaded the full qualifier, which is really cool to see. So I definitely recommend watching that qualifier. Though Dome in that qualifier did not actually do anything. Dome basically just sat there, got battered by Vader, but because it was still functional, which, to be fair, to give it credit, if it was up against S3 or something, it probably would survive the fight. That's just kind of weird to think about. But yeah, Dome was surprisingly durable. But in terms of everything else, its weapon is not effective. Its weapon is this big pizza slicer. Didn't look like it was effective. I guess, the design is okay. It's a dome. It is a dome. Dome by name, dome by nature. Let's just put it in the detail. Let's just never speak about it again. All right. So up next is the Dominator. Series 5's Dominator is the weakest Dominator by a long shot. The Series 4 Dominator was a brutal, powerhouse that just axed away at everything. It had exposed wheels, and that was its big Achilles heel. Series 5's Dominator gives it protective wheel guards, which is great. But, and this is a big but, it was quite unreliable. It didn't seem to like big hits, and it would break down because of it. It got flipped over by really big cheese, and it seemed to just struggle to move afterwards. It got hit by Hypno-Disc. It was immobilized, and for some dumb fucking reason, the judges didn't, count them out, which is fucking retarded. I absolutely hate that one wheel rule so much. it does have that to it. Dominator is Dominator wasn't the most reliable. Like, even when it was dealing with the other opponents in its heat, it seemed to just struggle a bit. It was really weird. Dominator in Series 5 was not the best. And, you look at it in Series 6, like, whilst the Series 6 version is a little bit ugly, I'm not going to lie, it at least was functional. It at least functioned. Whereas this one just didn't seem to function that well. Like, it does function. That's the thing. It got to the semi-finals somehow, let's be honest. But it just didn't seem like it could function brilliantly. Like, it just seemed like it was a lot more unreliable compared to its Series 4 counterpart, which kind of sucks because design-wise, this is fantastic. I think this is a great robot. I think Dominator genuinely is decent, but like there's a reason why I'm putting it in B tier, because the reliability gremlins are quite prevalent with this version of Dominator, which it doesn't really give you a good insight. I think had it been a bit more reliable, it would be higher than B. So up next is 11. 11 is a robot which shockingly never was in techno games, despite the fact that it's a robot that clearly looks like it was made for techno games. Like, it feels like the team arrived at the studio and accidentally went into Robot Wars instead of techno games. Like, oh, we were meant to go to techno games or a sprint off or something. Like, it feels like it accidentally went into the wrong studio. This is not the prettiest robot in the world. It literally is just a bunch of exposed wires and electronics. I guess you can sort of applaud the Walker design. In terms of functionality, it was slow and didn't really get anywhere. But I guess, again, the way it was walking looked pretty cool. I'm not going to lie. The way it walked looked pretty cool. But its design is ugly. It died very quickly. And it's exposed. It's just exposed. 11, not the most remembered robot in the world, but, I'll give it credit for the Walker design. Walkers aren't the best. They tend to have a bad reputation for being quite shit, but at the same time, they are, like, wonderfully engineered. Like, I'll give them credit for that. So up next is Evolution. Evolution fought in the Series 4 qualifiers, so it actually beat Dominator. Well, I say beat Dominator. It survived Dominator because Dominator was bouncing around so much they actually knocked his own link out. But there's actually pictures of the Dominator axe just covered in green paint because it's just smashed this wooden tank apart. And straight away, the design of Evolution is fantastic. I love the look of Evolution. I think it's such a great design. I love the fact that the turret is this spinning weapon. I love that as well. Functionality, it's not the most functional in the world, but it's not dreadful. Like, that's the thing. It isn't a dreadful robot. It could still function. If it was a robot which just didn't function, it'd be probably poor functionality, but it had good functionality. It had a great design. It's just not great. It's not brilliant. It does have one of my all-time out of the arenas, though, when Spawn again throws it out of the arena. I don't know why, but that particular out of the arena is one of my favorites. Just the speed and ferocity of it, and the way it just throws and tumbles out in such a fun way as well. The way it just sort of like, whoop. I don't know how to describe it. You just need to see the battle to enjoy it. And it was actually listed as like one of the best battles in the Ultimate Guidebook, if I recall. This is a C tier robot. It's definitely like near the bottom of C tier because I do think it is a good robot. I think it probably wouldn't win many matches, but at the same time, it is functional. It has a great design. Yeah, Evolution's decent. Firestorm is up next. Now, Firestorm Series 5 is an interesting one to look at because it's sort of like the opposite of Bigger Brother, whereas in Extreme, Firestorm was like absolutely amazing. It was able to just thrash over robots. It was really powerful. It was really good. Series 5's Firestorm is surprisingly shit. Like, it really is. It's surprisingly shit. Like, in its first battle, it loses its flipper. Then the other matches, it seems to struggle a bit to get into gear. It does well against Reactor Mind. The semi-final sees it get knocked out in one hit by Hypno-Disc. And, it's just... By the end of the series, it's just this destroyed mess. They remove all this functionality. Like, they made it a weaponless wedge by the end of it. And, yeah, like... I don't know what happened to it. Like, it's like with Bigger Brother. Like, why is it so good in... Like, they're filmed at the same time. Surely it should have been functional all around. Like, what happened? Like Jenny, what happened? Did Firestorm just have, like, an aneurysm? Like, did the team just give it the wrong batteries or wrong stuff? I don't actually know why in Series 5 it was quite as poor as it was. Now, it did come third, and truth be told, when they did sort out the problems, it did work well, but at the same time, like, it's shocking just how this version of Firestorm just seemed to, like, it was like limping its way through, and it's kind of embarrassing in a way. But then at the same time, it just had this sprout of energy and just go in and just kill. It's really hard to talk about, because it's like, I wouldn't say it's S tier. It's like, it's A tier for me, I still think it's A tier. Like, it's not as bad as Dominator. Like, Dominator's problems were so obvious, it actually kind of made a lot of the fights, like, unbearable to watch. Firestorm, at least, it was inconsistent. Like, the first round issue, the, semi-final issue, grand final issue, they were inconsistent, but they still managed to, like, all of a sudden become this, like, rabid dog, just going ahead and just smashing into things and just, like, it's weird to describe Firestorm in Series 5, because it's like, great, suck, great, suck, great, suck, great, suck. It's like flips-flops between being a great robot, and when it's great, it's excellent. It's fantastic. But when it's really not doing well, it's just embarrassing. Like, it's shocking like how just embarrassing it is. So up next is Fluffy. This is its debut series. Technically, it debuted in Extreme 1, but this is its debut main championship series. And it made a great impression in destroying 101, then obliterating Terahertz, and then ripping apart Pussycat's blade. Fluffy, in terms of design, I love the... I'm a sucker when it comes to see-through designs. I love Perspex armor on robots. I think it's great. Like, even today, like, with modern machines looking all blocky and ugly looking, when you have those robots which decide to go against the grain and be cool and unique, and they use that sort of look, I love it. I love it a lot. I love it. So Fluffy does have that. I love the looks of the spinning bar as well. The two massive sharp teeth on it. It's just brilliant. And the name being ironic, Fluffy, but it's not fluffy. It's really nasty. So Fluffy, in terms of functionality, it could function really well. It could, its design is great as well. It's technically is a basic design compared to a lot of robots these days in terms of spinner designs, but for what it's worth, at the time it was, and it did well. It did very well. I think Fluffy is great, but is Fluffy perfect? No. And of course, I think a lot of people already know why it's not perfect. It is not the most reliable robot in the world. Its reliability was pretty bad. You see this in the Heat final. It breaks down, despite the fact that Pussycat has big exposed wheels, and it was made weaponless by Fluffy. I don't know. Like, I feel like Fluffy is one of those unfortunate robots that, the reliability wasn't great, but still A tier, massively A tier. And I'm actually going to rank it higher than Firestorm, because Firestorm does have those problems. But yeah, Fluffy, fantastic robot. Up next is Gemini. Its last appearance of Team Mace. And Gemini, I love the look of Gemini. Gemini's great. And when it could function well. Unfortunately, Gemini added something which kind of neutered the robot a bit. And that being the wheelie bars. The wheelie bars were there to prevent it from wheeling about. Because you see this in Series 4. In Series 4, it sort of like went on its back and wheeled a bit. And, it would have been it was a bit of an issue, especially if they wanted to flip a robot out the arena, or flip a robot in general. Because they would be wheeling about and they wanted to just keep the robot down and still. So both robots were given these wheelie bars to prevent that. But that also became its detriment, because if the robots got flipped on its back, it couldn't self-right, because its flipping power was, how do I describe it? It had like this weird like gas power, like a certain type of gas that they used, which actually got them basically banned from Series 6, in case you're curious. And it's resulted in them being unable to like use their flipping powers greatly as like other robots. Yeah, like Gemini functionally was hit or miss. It's a bit like Firestorm and Dominator. It was hit or miss when it comes to the functionality. In terms of design, I love it. The design is great. There's nothing wrong with the design, but I felt like if this was a Series 4 Gemini, it would have had a much higher chance of winning. It would have had a higher chance of winning. It would have had a higher chance of progressing through. But this Gemini, no, it doesn't. It doesn't have any chance. Shame, because I think Gemini is okay-ish. It's definitely, I'm going to put it in B tier still, because I think the wheelie bars really did neuter the robot. It really was a disastrous change that they, I'm sure they probably regretted. But at the same time, it's a great robot. Okay, so up next is General Carnage. General Carnage returns from Series 3. This General Carnage is a gold robot with sharp teeth and a flipper. It got out of the arena in its first round battle, then it got battered and beaten by Stinger. It's funny because whenever I used to look at pictures of General Carnage, or back when like the only way you could watch robots on YouTube was, or watch it anywhere, was on YouTube. It was always pixelated, and the pixels made General Carnage look like it was silver. Like, it actually looked like it was silver. And even this picture that I'm using for this video, it looks silver. It's not silver, it's gold. If you look at the official image, you see the gold, and you see it in HD, or something, you do see the gold. But for what it's worth, it does look silver in other shots. But I digress. General Carnage, it's a very basic design, honestly. It's not inspiring. I guess it functioned. I guess it did function. And, at the same time, it did lose to Stinger after being fracked a few times, which, I don't know what to say about General Carnage, honestly. Because General Carnage, like, it worked, I guess. I'm going to put this in D. I'm just going to put this in D. It's going to be there with Derek and Big Nipper, in the sense that I don't know. I just don't know. All right, so up next is Granny's Revenge. Straight away, this is just going to go into the joke bot tier. There's no way you look at that thing and you think, oh yeah, that's a serious competitor. They know it's a joke bot. It is a joke bot, and it's a wonderful joke bot. I love it. I can always remember when the episode aired, and I remember seeing the Granny's Revenge fight. Like, we had just gotten back home, and I remember putting on the TV straight away, and it was airing, and literally the fight that was airing was this fight with Axe, and it just begun, and you saw this Granny get set alight in a blaze of glory and then pitted. It was beautiful. It was beautiful to watch. Granny's Revenge, I love the design of it. I think the design's fantastic. Like, this is a stellar design. It's not to be taken seriously. It's never going to win a fight at all. Like, unless it was up against like Ellie's pink bottle something. It's not going to win a fight. It's just not going to win a fight. It's just a... Yeah, it's silly, it's fun, it's goofy, it's fantastic. So up next is Gravedigger. Now, poor Gravedigger. You know, the Series 3 Gravedigger, you know, I love the coffin design of it. You know, Series 4's Gravedigger, I was a little bit confused with the design, what they were trying to do. You know, I like the artwork, but I do think that the coffin design was much better. And I still think the coffin design worked. Even the flipper worked. But at the same time, the Series 5 Gravedigger with the big axe, I think that is quite a powerful looking axe. You know, it's a bit like Black Widow in the sense that when you see the way it slams down and smashes down to opponents, it does look like it could pack a punch. It looks like it could pack a punch and it could do well if it was up against better robots. Unfortunately, it was not. And yeah, Gravedigger, poor Gravedigger. Unfortunately, it didn't really do all that great. It did lose to Tornado, which is just a terrible way to start the series. It looked like it did quite well in its qualifiers, though, because there's loads of photographs and loads of like reports of it in the qualifiers, and it did look like it actually did pretty decently in the qualifiers. So I think, you know, Gravedigger had potential there. We just didn't get to see enough of it, and it's a shame because I think Gravedigger does look like a good robot. I think his axe could have packed a punch. And I think, you know, if I'm going to put it in C tier, because I think it does look like the type of robot that would be able to do stuff which would work. All right, so up next is Gesundabot. One of the more forgettable robots of Series 5. This robot, I kind of got reminded of a lot because there was someone who absolutely loved this robot. And I feel like I'm going to disappoint them with some of the comments I'm about to say because I do not care for this robot. We did not see a lot of it. The design of it was very bare bone basic. It looks like the type of thing you make in Robot Arena. Not Robot Arena. Robot Wars Arenas of Destruction, I should say, or Extreme Destruction. You know, has a little boglin on the top of it. And there's not really anything to talk about. Like, really, there's nothing to talk about. The design... The design looks confused almost. Like, it has these two lifters, I think, and it doesn't look like it could do it. It looks like it tried to have, like, an act. It tried to do what is it? CV would do. Cataclysmic Variabot, where it has, like, all these different weapons, and it would just do all these different wonderful little things. And maybe if we saw a bit more of it, it could have been a bit more interesting. But unfortunately for what we get, it's not the best. It's actually pretty disappointing. And the design is very boring looking. Like, I don't really want to put it in F tier. But it is tempting to put it in F tier because it did sort of just get pushed and then flipped out the arena, like, very effortlessly. Like, it didn't do anything. But at the same time, it does have that potential. So it's like with Accident, where like it is nearing the F tier, but because it has that little thing that makes it just a little bit more interesting, like that might have had potential. I don't know. Like, maybe I'm being too generous. All right, so up next is Hippopotamus. Design-wise, Hippopotamus is great. Now, this is another case of is it a joke bot or is it not a joke bot? That is the question, and I don't know, because, like, it's Fighting Talk. Like, if you look at Fighting Talk, which technically this robot is just a modified version of Fighting Talk, because Fighting Talk was this big pyramid robot. But that was clearly a joke bot. Like, the way it was designed, the goofiness of it, the exposed ass cheeks, if it was flipped over, the kilts and everything. Like, clearly, it was a joke bot. But then this one... You know what? Yeah, this is a joke bot. There's no way this was in the arena to be taken seriously. It's there because it's just there to be destroyed. It's there to have fun, to be goofy. You know, sure, Stinger made some children cry because they loved this robot. But at the same time, you know, yeah. So up next is Hydra. Now, poor Hydra had a very poor start. It was flipped about and bullied by Spawn again in its opening battle and didn't really do anything. Now, obviously, if we were to judge Hydra for its performance as a whole, then Hydra would arguably be, much higher, especially when you look at it in Series 7, like how brilliant that version was, even if it did lose all of its fights. Similarly, the Series 6 version won a lot of fights, as did the Extreme 2 version. So, there is potential. There is certainly potential, and it could certainly function. Series 5 version we don't see much of, and because we don't see much of, unfortunately we don't really get a good clue as to how good and how wonderful this robot could have been. Like, I love Hydra in general, but at the same time, this is the first version, and the first version was not the most impressive in the world. I'm going to put it in C tier, but it's going to be a very low C tier, because I think it if it was anything like the Series 6 and 7 version, it obviously could do well. It obviously could function really well. It could obviously, do a lot of stuff. Unfortunately, it was up against a robot that was just overwhelming it, and it just didn't really get anywhere. That's a real shame, but it's still good. So up next is the 4th place robot of this series, Hypno-Disc. Hypno-Disc is still as powerful as it ever was. The way it tears apart Atomic is brutal. Like the Atomic fight is just like it's almost that gag in The Simpsons, where that kid's crying. He says, "Stop! He's already dead." When Homer beats up one of the other mascots, I think it was Homer. Yeah. It reminds me of that. It's just stop, he's already dead. Like, please leave Atomic alone. Atomic's a beautiful robot. You're just ripping apart. Hypno-Disc, I should say, it's not as powerful as the Series 4 version. The Series 4 version was a fucking beast of a machine. This one, you're starting to see the weaknesses. This one, especially in Extreme 1, where it's just so disastrously in Series 1. Extreme Series 1, I should say. In Series 5, on the other hand, it's given an easy fight with Black Widow, and then every other fight technically was a pretty tough fight. It was up against All-Star after All-Star after All-Star after All-Star. Literally every one of its fights, except for the first fight, was against an All-Star of sorts. And so, Hypno-Disc, it still did really well against those circumstances. That said, I don't know, like I feel like Hypno-Disc does start to show its like weaknesses, like in the sense that it's not able to penetrate armor as well as it used to. Like, when it comes to Firestorm, it does kill it in one hit, but there's no real scarring caused. It doesn't leave a scar on Dominator, even though it knocked out its wheel. It does destroy Atomic, and when you look at the Bulldog Breed fight, even though it doesn't look that bad, it does actually bend the robot quite massively. Like, I'm not even kidding. When the Bulldog Breed fight, I implore people to look closely at that fight. Like, pause it maybe when it's like being pushed, and you'll see literally the robot is bent like out of shape completely. It's actually like like I've always been curious as to why it didn't appear in the Annihilator. Like, if it just had its link knocked out, but upon rewatching that fight, like, you see how badly it was. But again, like, it's capable of ripping apart Bigger Brother, but at the same time, it was still able to be pushed about into the pit. And so, against Firestorm a second time, Firestorm had no weapon this time. It still got pushed about. So, you are starting to see that Hypno-Disc can be bullied, it can be prodded, it can be beaten. And, Extreme 1 saw a very disastrous performance of it. I don't know, like, I feel like this is where Hypno-Disc is starting to go a little bit on the deaf side. And that's the other thing, actually. The design of it. I do not like the design of Hypno-Disc here. I feel like the design is disappointing. Like, compared to the way it looked in Series 4 with the spikes all over it, the 2 spikes at the back and the 3 spikes on the top, it looked beautiful. And even the disc, the way it was like a domed disc as well, looked fantastic. Whereas this one's much more like the Series 3 Hypno-Disc. I don't know, like, I don't really like that. But Hypno-Disc is still like an S tier robot. Like, it is a good robot. It may not be my favorite robot in the world, but it is a good robot. And there's a reason why it's just still so powerful. It's why it came fourth, in fact. So Immortalis is up next. Immortalis is also a Techno Games competitor. It was called the Celestial Terror. Immortalis is a very weird looking robot. It's got like a giant light bulb on the back. It got axed by Exterminator, and it's got a mask, like a Halloween mask that's just been stapled to the front. The front scoop of it is based and is used for Metalis in Series 7. Like, if you look at Metalis in Series 7, I think that's the right robot's name. I don't remember. It does have the same bit. So that there's an interesting bit of trivia. You can actually see that this was recycled and reused. But of all the Team Death robots, this is like one of the worst ones, like by a long shot. Like, I'm struggling to think of anything positive to say. It died easily. It didn't really do much. It was kind of naff. Like, Techno Games is what saves it slightly, because it could work there, but I don't know. This might be our first F tier, because there's really nothing to say about Immortalis that's positive. Like, at least with other robots in the D tiers, there's something positive to say about it. Or there's some, like, element that might have been interesting, but this one, there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing. And up next is Juggernaut. Now, Juggernaut 2, to be precise. There was a Juggernaut 1. Juggernaut 1 was a super heavyweight that never appeared. It was going to be in the super heavyweight showdown for Series 3, which got cancelled. This Juggernaut is a robot that exists. It's often regarded as one of the worst robots in Robot Wars' history. It's this big yellow block with some Scottish flags and a mascot on top. Its official image was sideways on its stats board. Its flipper looks useless. It's too narrow. It's too awkward. It broke apart from being flipped. It has flat sides, so if it's flipped over on its sides, it cannot self-right, because there's no self-righting mechanisms on the side. This is the definition of a robot that is complete and utter shit. Like, this is nothing positive to say. This might be the worst robot of Series 5. This might genuinely be one of the worst robots of Series 5. Like, loads of people hate this thing. And I often see people, say, oh, wow, if you are so critical of robots, why don't you make one yourself? Like, people are critical of films. People are critical of music. People are critical of all sorts of things. They're critical of video games, critical of everything you can think of, literature, etc. They not everyone makes films, not everyone makes video games, not everyone makes music, not everyone makes this, that, the other art. They still have the right to criticize it, and Juggernaut, I have the right to fucking criticize this thing, especially when you consider that there are qualifiers. Qualifiers which there are robots which fail to qualify, including veterans like Killertron. Sure, Killertron might have been garbage, but who knows? Including robots that appear later on and did pretty decently, like Barbaric Response. Robots which looked cool, like Vader. You have all these robots. Veterans, cool robots that could have been really effective, who knows? Lost potential, perhaps. And yet, something like this is allowed in. This is what the production team literally sat down. They reviewed the footage of the qualifiers. They reviewed the application forms. They reviewed everything. And they thought themselves, as they sat around a table, probably stroking it, probably thinking to themselves, oh, I want that robot in. And that's what they thought when they looked at Juggernaut. They looked at that. They looked at the qualifiers. They looked at all sorts of other things. They looked at all the other robots that failed to qualify, and they thought this deserves to be in. That this has potential to be in. And yet, Killatron, Barbaric Response, Vader, they failed to qualify. And they all failed to qualify. But this thing is allowed in. This thing, which I don't believe for a fucking second want to fight, was allowed in. F tier. Can openers next. This is the first version of can opener. Now, once again, this is one of those robots like Barbarus, where you look at it and, like, you can see the awkward first stages. Like, it's not as good as what comes later. And what comes later is a million times more memorable, and is the thing that you're going to remember for future, events. Like, everyone remembers the can opener that is invertible. The can opener that is a big clawing machine. Maybe it has a spike at the back. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's been cut in half and it's got big exposed wheels as well as being invertible. Who knows? You've seen a can opener. That's the can opener you think of. No one really thinks of the Series 5 can opener, which was this big diamond-shaped robot with a big self-righting arm and the big jaws. It looks like it was going to fall apart when it got flipped by Atomic, I will give it this. The design is great, but it looked like it was falling apart. It did not look like it was the most functional. Its self-righter didn't work, but its self-righter just outright didn't work. And I do like the little glove they had on it. Yeah, like this can opener, great design, just not very functional. Let's move you to there. Great design, but not functional. Oh. All right, so up next is Cat 3. Cat 3 is the first of the Cat 3 machines, arguably, and the third of the Caterkiller machines. It's no longer Caterkiller. Now it's Cat 3. Cat 3, very boxy robot. I always found the Series 5 version to be very boxy. Its axe wasn't that bad. Like, I will give it that. The axe isn't that bad. The design is very... it's just too blocky for my taste, personally. Like, it functions decently as well. It's not the great functional robot. It did sort of win one of its fights because the other one drove in the pit. Yeah, like, Cat 3 might join Barbarus, in fact, in the great functionality but poor design category. It's just not enough for C tier, not enough for B tier, not enough for any of that, but it's not low as D tier. It's still a good robot when it could be. King Bee Powerworks is next. Now, King Bee, man, why unfortunate history. It kind of got worse as years went on, which is really unfortunate because, like, you look at it in Series 2, it was really good. Series 3, it was still pretty decent. Series 4, it was starting to be a bit more weaker. It still won the tag team mind. Extreme 1, Series 5, it's kind of not brilliant. I think the design's great. I still think the design looks great. I love the Perspex armor. I love the blue and the orange look of it. I think the color contrast is great. Still a speedy and vicious little machine when it wants to be. It can just speed around, slam and slice into other robots. I think that's great. Little saw blades as well. But yeah, like Powerworks, I think this is still a C tier robot. Like, if I put Hydra and Evolution up there, I think King Bee can go up there. It's not as good as B tier because I think, it is struggling a bit. Like, its reliability problems, it breaks down, I don't know. Like, it's probably C or B tier. Like, it's hard to decide. It's like in between almost. Kryptonite, a robot which is once again one of these really forgettable Series 5 robots. Like, Series 5 has a lot of robots which are really forgettable. Robots which you just don't remember at all. Like, they're just there. Like, oh yeah, that thing exists, doesn't it? Kryptonite is one of them. Kryptonite, It's an axe bot. It looks black in this picture, black and green, but actually it was silver and green, and its armor looked like it was made out of like paper. It was really weak. Its axe didn't seem to do anything. Its bodywork was very flimsy. Its functionality was very flimsy. It was not very good. This might be another F tier, because it's just like, this is higher than the other two, but man, this is just generic bot number 503. I don't know. Chronic is next. Chronic 2, yeah. Well, just Chronic 2. Chronic 2, design-wise, this is a massive improvement from the first Chronic. I think the more streamlined look looks great. The flipper, it is just the front bit, that's the flipper, not the whole ramp. You can sort of tell this is a robot that's going to become Apollo one day, like, just by the look of it right now. I think the design is great. Like, in terms of its appearance, it only fought one battle before it was eliminated, lost in the first round. It was defeated very easily, unfortunately, because it just wasn't very functional. It was, beaten up by King Bee, slammed it about, and just couldn't really fight back that well. It wasn't bad, but it just could have, like, worked a bit better, maybe in a better circumstance. Once again, this is one of those robots which I feel like, under better circumstances, maybe it could have done better. Design looks great, but its functionality could be a lot to be desired. Still not bad, still pretty decent. Up next is Lamsey. Lamsey is very slow as a robot. Like, rewatching this episode, Heat B, like, the design of it is quite fun. I love the fact that it has the sheep over the wolf's head, and then when it flips and the sheep disappears, it's got the wolf revealed. I think that's such a clever little gimmick. Other than that, it's a black robot. It's just, it's black lifter, really. Doesn't really have the greatest amount of speed. It was very easily flipped about and shunted about and all that. It is interesting what would have happened if it fought Hypno-Disc. Like, would Lamsey have won against Hypno-Disc? Would it have survived the blows? Like, who knows? Because it has that design that gets you interested, doesn't it? Lamsey as a whole, it's okay. It really is okay. Like, this is, again, a C-tier robot that just is okay. I'm going to put it right up here, though. Major Tom is next. Major Tom has the what is it called? The go-kart design this time. It's no longer the bumper car design. The Extreme 1 version was more longer, whereas this one's a lot more small and compact. It's also a little angled slightly differently, I feel. Other than that, it's mostly the same. It's not the most functional robot in the world. Its blade didn't really do all that much. It didn't really do brilliantly in terms of control, but its design is great. Like, the design is fantastic. The design is fabulous. Like, the design is wonderful. You can't go wrong with Major Tom. It is just a lovely robot. Like, I see you can't go wrong with Major Tom, but Series 7's Major Tom exists. So, Major Tom, it's a memorable robot. It's one of those, like, all-star machines that you just love. And its design is great. Its design is wonderful, in my opinion. Up next is Ming Free. Ming Free. Now, it goes for the more crusher design this time. It's basically Ming 2, but with a crusher literally just plastered on top. Exposed wheels this time, no longer wheel guarded, which is a very bad design flaw. And it does prove it when it goes up against spinners. Now, Ming Free arguably got screwed over in this series because Matilda went out of her CPZ and just smashed into it. Now, sure, Ming Free was getting battered by terahertz, but still, that's a bit rude. Ming Free, I've never been a fan of the crusher design personally, but it is functional. And, whilst I do think the design is kind of shit, all things considered, it was a functional robot. I don't necessarily like Ming Free all that much. I do think it is one of my least favorite Ming machines. Ming 2, I really liked, but Ming Free, not so much. I'm going to put it in the great functionality but poor design category because I think it looks decent. Well, I say it looks decent. It looked decent in terms of its functionality. It was screwed over in its match though, so yeah. Mini Morgue is next. Mini Morgue is the latest of the Morgue machines. The Mini Morgues are not my favorite. I'm just going to say it right now. Mega Morgue I liked. Yeah, Mega Morgue, you saw that it may have been big and bulky, but at least it worked. You see it again in Series 7, Mega Morgue really worked. But Mini Morgue, like, for one thing, the flipper is so angled, it's off-putting. It just, I don't know. Like, I don't really like the angle of that flipper. I don't think Mini Morgue is the best, personally. I think it was kind of the worst of the Morgue machines. Design is okay. I'll give it that. I will say the design is okay, but even then, like, the flipper design is not so okay. Like, where do I put it? I'm going to put it right here. D tier. I like Mini Morgue. I do, the Welsh side of me likes it. But, yeah. So up next is Monad. Now, Monad is interesting because Monad actually was a very good robot in terms of its speed. It had good speed and power. It was great pace. 4x4 is basically the same as Monad. And you see how fast that is, But in terms of design, this is not a great design. It's Team Monad is a great team in the sense that they kept evolving the robots each year. And so this is their first one. Even from the first start, this is good. And even to this day, the team still fight with 4x4, which, was their golden child almost. Monad, I don't know, in terms of speed, it's great. In terms of, design, not so great. So, I don't know, is this a D1? Or is this because it did break down against Tiberius and it was pitted. It's got high ground clearance, so design isn't all perfect. Speed is really what it's worth. I'm going to put it in D. Because, for all intents and purposes, Monad was a fast robot. It could have had great potential. It just didn't get there. Up next is Mousetrap. Now, Mousetrap, it's funny to think that this is the robot that gave S3 a scare. And had it, angled its Mousetrap blade a little bit closer, Mousetrap could have killed off S3 and changed the course of Series 5. Not by much. I mean, Stinger would have probably beaten Mousetrap and in a vengeance, unless, of course, they killed Mousetrap. But even then, they would have then had to face, I think, Big Brother next, which I don't think either of them would have won. And if they won the Losers Medal, then he would have faced Razor, and I don't think either of them would have won against Razor either. So, Mousetrap had the potential to change history. And I love the look of Mousetrap. Mousetrap's the giant Mousetrap design. I think that's fantastic. But the guillotine blade is what the sharp blade that they have on there now makes it even more better than the Series 4 version. And it's a shame that we didn't get to see more of this version of Mousetrap, because I think this would have been fantastic to witness. To see this Mousetrap in action, it would have been wonderful. I actually think Mousetrap goes into B tier because it really was... It gave S3 a scare. If you can give S3 a scare, you deserve the credit you get. All right, so up next is Napalm. Now, Napalm was up against Warhog, and I believe the intended purpose was for Napalm to just get destroyed. But they decided to put Warhog as its opponent. Warhog, a robot that is notorious for having shit reliability. And so Napalm didn't get destroyed. Oh dear. Napalm 2... Napalm 1, it might have been made out of scraps, but there's something charming about it. Napalm 2, on the other hand, I don't know, I felt like the more smaller look of it, the back axe and all that, it just didn't have the same appeal. It just didn't have the same, thing. I don't know how to describe it. You look at the original Napalm and this one, it it just doesn't have that, it doesn't have that factor to it. So yeah, Napalm, I think, is honestly, functionally, it worked well. It worked brilliantly. It was quite surprising how well it worked. I mean, it did sort of get pushed back into the arena in the Annihilator, but let's just ignore that. But yeah, like I think design-wise it's kind of shit, but functionality-wise, I think it was actually pretty decent, honestly. Up next is Oblivion. No, not Oblivion. Obsidian. I got it wrong. Obsidian. Obsidian. Big black axe robot. It's shiny. And to be fair, this robot does still exist to this day, and I don't know if it's as good as today. I don't know. I haven't really looked into Obsidian's live show appearances that much. Right, so I'm going to just say that this is a very okay-ish robot. Like, it's not anything to write home about. It's just there. Onslaught is next. Onslaught. Now, Onslaught, how unfortunate. Like, Onslaught's, like, it's appeared since Series 2. It's got that memorability factor, especially in the Annihilator, how well it was there, And, of course, there's that iconic shot of Dead Metal soaring straight through it. Onslaught in Series 5, the only real difference it had was the tyres were a bit more thicker and I believe thinner, if you look at them. And it had a green skull instead of a, black skull. Yeah, very, very interesting, isn't it? I think because we've seen what this Onslaught could do in Series 4 and what it could do for its worth in Series 5, it did have the functionality that it did have, it does have the design. It does. And, seeing some more recent stuff like for the past few years at the Robo Nerd, it did look like it could have worked a lot better. Onslaught, I'm going to put it in C because it is one of those lost potential ones where it's like, yeah, it's there, but it wasn't there. Panic Attack is next. Panic Attack didn't really have much of a struggle, except, of course, when it faced flippers. And, of course, we know what happens when it faces flippers. Well, actually, it wasn't the flippers this time. It was the spinners, because Barbarus broke the forks in the first round, and then Pussycat just shredded it, and then it faced Firestorm, and we all know what happens when Firestorm and Panic Attack meet. Firestorm always flips over, which is a shame, because I think the Series 5 Panic Attack is a beautiful robot. Absolutely wonderful. I think the design is great. I think the functionality is also great. I'm stuttering now. The controls by Kim Davies is marvelous. It is wonderful. It is fantastic. It's beautifully done. It's a fantastic way of driving the robot. I think he does an excellent job. I think Panic Attack is a beautiful robot in general. I think he's a good robot. I think he does a great job. I think it's still great, even if it is, being bullied about by spinners and flippers. It's honestly S tier. Because it really is just really good. Like, really, really good. So up next is Plunderbird. This is its final ever appearance. We're never going to see Plunderbird again. That's depressing. It's not as good as the Series 4 Plunderbird. I think the Series 4 Plunderbird is more beautiful looking. This Plunderbird, it's speedy around the arena. Its claw did function, but it was very wide. It had that like bopping issue where, it was, I don't know how to describe it. It's sort of like where a robot sort of like bops up and down as it's like charging forward. It's like, yeah, it was torn to pieces by S3, which is a fucking brutal way to go. I mean, it's an excellent fight, but depressing when you realise there's Plunderbird on the receiving end. I love Plunderbird. It is a C tier robot. Like, it is, let's just be blunt about it, but it isn't dreadful. Up next is Prize Fighter. Prize Fighter is massively improved from its previous appearances. Series 3 had massive high ground clearance, although I think it could actually lower itself. It had that box on the front and a boxing glove on top. Prize Fighter 2 in Series 4, this is basically the same as that one, except this one's a bit more angled and the flip, I believe, is a bit more bigger. And we saw its potential here. The Series 4 version was okay-ish for what it's worth, but it died very quickly and was easily knocked out. This Prize Fighter, on the other hand, we see a lot more of. It is capable of just flipping Thermidor over multiple times and killing it. It's capable of standing its ground against Wild Thing. This is the Heat finalist Prize Fighter, and I like Prize Fighter. I love the see-through plastic shell. Again, Perspex armor. I love the Spitfire it has on the front. I think it's great. Functionality, it was wonderful. Maybe it could have been a bit faster. In terms of design, it's great. It's a B tier. It is an easy B tier, and I really, really like Prize Fighter. Up next is Pussycat, my personal favorite robot of all time. Now, Pussycat in Series 5, I do think it's not as pretty as the Series 4 version. Series 4 version is beautiful. Absolutely wonderful. This one, not as pretty, but it still works. I still think it's great. It proved itself in its battles. It was able to just stab into robots, push them about, slice into them, break them apart. Very, very good machine. Overall, obviously, it did meet its match against Firestorm, which is just unfortunate. Is when Firestorm was deciding it wanted to work, it kicked poor Pussycat's ass, but Pussycat still fought on. It still shredded, still dug its teeth in, still clawed its way, not to a victory, but still, fantastic robot. My personal favorite robot of all time. So, obviously it's going S tier, and it's still a very good robot. I think it's not as pretty as the Series 4 version. I do miss the shinier look on it, the big, weird cat face on the one side and all the dead robots on the other, personally speaking. All right. So, is the champion of Series 5 Razor. Razor, one of the best robots in the show by a massive margin. Beautiful, sleek, mean machine. And Series 5 really did let it shine. It had a scare in the first round against Big Nipper. Big Nipper's claw managed to take out the self-righting mechanism. And, Razor fought on hard. It managed to crush through the competition. One could argue it had a very easy run because it was up against robots which arguably weren't much difficulty. But then at the same time, it did face S3, and Razor's history of spinners is not the best, against Pussycat. And yet it's able to face its fears against S3. It was able to survive Big Nipper's initial attacks. It was able to do all this and still become champion. And even the match against Firestorm, we've seen Razor and Firestorm fight so many times, but in that one, they're dodging around the pit. It's just, ooh. Razor had a few close calls this series, I'm not going to lie. And the fact that they become champions just makes it all worthwhile. It really does. Razor, fantastic machine. It's up there with Pussycat. I'm actually going to rank it higher than Pussycat because it is the best machine of Series 5. I was about to say Series 7, it's Series 5. I cannot count. I can only count to 4. So up next is... that's a joke, by the way. Up next is Reactor. Reactor is not as pretty as the previous Reactor. The previous Reactor with the big, atomic wheels, I think looked better. And the red as well. I just feel like the other Reactor looked better. Personally, I think the other Reactor looked more pretty looking. Even the little axe at the back doesn't seem to be the most functional. But this Reactor did get to the Heat final. It did surprisingly beat Gemini. It's not the best, but it was still doing decently. Honestly, Reactor isn't bad. Reactor is going to be C tier because it wasn't the greatest machine in the world, but it wasn't dreadful. It's okay. Rick is next. Rick was defeated by Suicidal Tendencies. but then was reinstated because Suicide Tendencies had to withdraw, which really sucks because it would have been wonderful to see it fight Razor, even if I actually think it would have been an easier fight for Razor. But Rick, it defeated Destructible, then it fought Razor. Rick, I actually do like on a personal scale. I do quite like Rick in a weird way. That said, Rick is a grey wedge. It is a atypical flipper. It is basic as basic can be. In terms of functionality, it wasn't brilliant. It had an easy fight with Destructible, but against two Crushers, it was not great. Is it completely dog trash? No. This is, again, it's going to be a C tier. Like, there's a lot of robots that are going in C tier, but it really is just average. It's like, it's not bad in terms of design or functionality, but it's just not to the great levels it could be. Robo Chicken is up next. Now, Robo Chicken Evo, as this one's called. The first Robo Chicken, I love the design of. I think it's great. Robo Chicken Evo, the flipper is improved, as is the axe. However, I think this design is absolutely fucking hideous. The big bulbous look of Robo Chicken here is just so disgusting looking. Like, if it wasn't for the fact that it's Robo Chicken, it is like still got that chicken look, this would not be ranking high. I think the design is shit, personally. I do. I think the design is shit. Like, just because it is Robo Chicken is a great robot, I don't like the design that much. I think Robo Chicken is going to go into the great functionality but poor design, because I feel like the bulbous look of it is just too much. It's going to be at the top, though, because it is just about touching the C tier. It just hasn't reached it. Up next is Rohog. Rohog looks like a computer mouse from this picture. Rohog has a very weird weapon. Even to this day, I don't know what the fuck Rohog's weapon was. Like, well, what was it trying to accomplish? What was it trying to do? I don't know. The picture makes it look pretty, but when you see it in the arena, it's not the prettiest robot in the world. It fought in the Series 4 qualifiers, and it lost to a robot called Tiny, I believe, which was this big spinner. And F tier. It's just going to go in F tier. It's not. Like, what the hell does Rohog do? Like, even to this day, I'm confused. What does Rohog do? Seriously, what does it do? How does the weapon work? How does this robot function in some form or capacity? It was easily torn apart. It's easily defeated by Sir Chromalot. That's all you need to know. That's all you need to know. Ruff Dougal is next. I love Ruff Dougal. I will say this. I kind of wish that its fur didn't get burnt off in the qualifiers, because in the qualifiers its fur got burnt off, and it looked more like Dougal from the Magic Roundabout, not Magic Railroad. That's Tom's Tank Engine. Magic Roundabout, where it was like more shaggy looking, and I do kind of wish that they kept that here, but at the same time, how can you not love Ruff Dougal? It is a lovely robot. It's surprisingly competent as well. Like, in the qualifiers, it won its qualifiers. Like, its little spike was able to penetrate through like a robot that looked like Cassius called Pendragon. It was a functional robot. It even survived a match against Panic Attack. Like, this machine was pretty fucking decent. Was it great? No, I mean, it lost to Gemini, but I mean, he had his ear blown off and flipped over. But, this is a robot that can survive, because we see in Series 6, like, it can catch fire and get bullied about and survive the full match. Like, this is a survivor right here. But it is a joke bot. And it's a great joke bot, but not as good as Destructible. Destructible is still my favourite. Sorry, Ruff Dougal. But I do love you, Ruff Dougal. You are fantastic. I do prefer you pink, though. Also, one thing about Ruff Dougal, all the official images, all the publicised photos of it, had it with a coat on, but it never had a coat in the arena. It was just grey. The burnt fur from the qualifiers, funny enough. That always fascinates me. I don't know why. All right, so up next is S3, the Hammerhead Spinner, as they call it. I love the look of S3. S3's design is fantastic. You wouldn't think that this is the team that came with Sting once upon a time. That lost in the first round to Deator. You wouldn't think that. Now you look at it and it's just this, this beautiful, sexy machine and destructive power. And, it's not, if it loses to a robot, it's usually losing to a good robot, like, Bigger Brother or Razor. And even then, like, it's scary to face this thing because, you see what it did to Plunderbird. It could easily knock out any opponent that comes its way. S3 is beautiful. It is fantastic. It is S tier for sure, baby. It is going up there. I might even put it in third at the moment because it is just that good. I love S3. S3 is great. All right, so up next is Sabertooth. This is the first Sabertooth to appear in the show. Sabertooth is more famous for the reboot appearances. At this moment in time, it's not really an all-star. In fact, Sabertooth is kind of a nobody. The reboot is what made it into an all-star, obviously. But here is nobody, and it's funny because I forgot his name. Gabe, that's right. Gabe, Gabriel. His daughter was born when he was fighting on robots with this robot. So thankfully for him, he lost in the first round because he'd go and, find his wife and, help her. This version of Sabertooth, like, the thing about Sabertooth is it always had this weird design philosophy. Like, the first few Sabertooth, at least, because... like, even Series 8 Sabertooth had, like, a weird design. But at the same time, it's a fascinating design. I really like the design in a weird way. That said, the functionality of it was not good. It did lose to a wooden tank. And it did break down very quickly after being knocked in one hit. So its functionality was not great. But at the same time, you do see glimpses of that, little shredder it had, which was pretty nasty. But again, it didn't do very well. Its design is weirdly great. I'm not going to lie. I like the look of Sabertooth. I think Sabertooth looks good. It just didn't function good. So up next is Shredder. Another fantastic design. It looks like a cassette tape. A lot of people always call it a cassette tape. It does look like a cassette tape. With the two wheels there. Or two blades there. I love the purple look. Right off the bat, the purple look is beautiful. Not a lot of robots use purple, which is a shame because purple is a great color to use, especially the glossy paint. Like, glossiness looks better than solid blocky paint, which too many robots these days use blocky paint, which make them all really boring. Like, that's the problem with the modern robots. They're all blocky refrigerators, really. They're too advanced. We need to go back. But I digress. Like, Shredder, design-wise, is great. Functionality, it didn't last very long. It pitted itself. But it still managed to shred, leave some scratches on a mousetrap, which, to give credit where credit is due. So again, I'm going to put it right where, Hydra is, in the sense that we also do know what it's capable of, but at the same time, yeah, maybe next time. Okay, so up next is Sir Chromalot. Technically a joke bot, but like with Plunderbird and Deator, it's going to be ranked with the rest of them. This machine, it has a powerful flipper. Much better weaponry than before. Series 4, it had a weird drill that got bent out of shape and broke off every time. The flipper worked a little bit better. It did have a tactic of running away and hoping that the opponent would pit itself. Yeah, so Chromalot. It is a lovely robot. At the end of the day, it is a wonderful machine. It is decently functional. It could work. It could do decently. Was it brilliant? Not the best, but again, you can't help but love it. It is there. All right, so up next is S.M.I.D.S.Y. S.M.I.D.S.Y, Series 4 S.M.I.D.S.Y was a massive improvement to Series 3 S.M.I.D.S.Y. This one is not as much of an improvement. It does have a flywheel, but it was still pretty good. It is still very aggressive. It uses the lifter more than it uses the flywheel. The flywheel can still deliver a nasty scratch or two. But yeah, like S.M.I.D.S.Y, you can't really go wrong with S.M.I.D.S.Y. It is a great robot. It's very functional, very good design, very sleek, simple design, but very good design. I love the orange and the black. It contrasts so well with each other. I love this image as well, the official image of it. I don't know why. It just looks so striking. Something about it. I don't know. But yeah, S.M.I.D.S.Y, this is definitely a higher ranking one. It's going to go in A tier. It's going to go in A tier, actually, because it really did do well. And, you know, it even gave Chaos 2 a scare. You know, if it's able to give Chaos 2 the reign champion a scare, must be doing something right. All right, so up next is Spawn Again. Spawn Again is not my favorite robot in the world. I do not like Spawn Again. I really don't like it. The Series 5 Spawn Again is okay for the most part. You know, it is the best of the Spawn Again machines, which gives you a clue of how much I think of the other ones. It is the best of the other Spawn Again machines. It is functional. It's surprisingly more reliable. The design is okay. I actually think the design in Extreme 1 was better. The red, like, webbish. No, the web sort of like holographic design. I think that looked wonderful and looked a million times better than this shitty looking design. The design is so blocky and so boring. It's really boring. Like that's really just the best I can put it. But again, it's not dreadful. You know, it functions. It's still okay. I'm gonna put it into B tier because it is a functional machine. You know, it is the best Spawn Again machines. And if I think that the best of the Spawn Again machines is a B, then the other ones are so much lower. Splinter is next. Splinter is greatly improved, arguably, compared to the previous. You know, it has 4 axes. It's got 2 side axes and big one at top. It was flipped out the arena. It didn't really do a lot of damage at all. You know, it functioned for the most part, and design is okay, but you know, it's one of those robots where I don't know. I don't think it would have won a heat. I don't think it would have, you know, accomplished what it did in Series 4. It's okay. It's very much an okay robot. I'm gonna have to put it like right there. You know, it's C tier. I'm gonna have to say it's C tier. Steel Avenger is next. Steel Avenger, we didn't get to see much of either. It fought the Tartan Terror, then it got flipped out of the arena by Chaos 2. But what we saw in Extreme 1, it was decent. It was functional. It was able to deliver explodes. It was able to use the lifter. You know, it is actually an okay robot, all things considered. You know, Steel Avenger, I do rate. I think the design's great. I think it's wonderful. I am going to put it in B tier because all things considered, I think it is good. You know, it just didn't have much of an appearance. Stinger is next. Now, Stinger got to the heat final. It was, you know, 3rd place in Series 4. Now it's all the way in heat final. Could it have won the heat? Maybe it could have won a heat in a better circumstance. Like, you know, certainly if Mousetrap had killed off S3 in round 2, there's a chance Stinger would have been in the semi-finals. Like, I'm just saying. It probably wouldn't have gone beyond the semi-finals, but it was going to be in the semi-finals. Stinger, I do kind of miss the little, like, I don't know what it was, like the base plate it had. I like the base plate it had in Series 4. I think that looked I quite like that, but I can see why they got rid of it. You know, it sort of get trapped on it. It was easy for robots to flip it. You know, I understand why they got rid of that. So it's now just a full-on axle bot, nothing to hold it. You know, there were some reliability problems here and there, like it would stop sometimes, or it just wouldn't be as like hard hitting. But all in all, Stinger's still fantastic. I love Stinger. It's one of my all-time favorite robots. You know, it still functioned well. It still did decently. It lost to a great opponent, which was S3. You know, it's an understandable loss, so to speak. You know, at the end of the day, it was an understandable loss. You know, it's not like a loss where, oh, it lost and it, you know, it shouldn't have lost. No, it lost for a good reason. You know, could it have won the heat? Maybe. That's the thing. We could have seen a Stinger that perhaps would have done better. I'm going to put it in A tier, and I'm going to put it right at the top of A tier because, you know, it is a good robot. You know, and it may be one of my all-time favorites, but I'm not going to put it in S tier. I'm not going to put it in S tier just because it did have that intermental issues. Stormforce is next. Stormforce is another robot that still exists to this day. It's a Scottish robot. It's a Well, okay, the modern one's a Scottish robot, but this one, big barrel body, has a flipper, has an axe, got flipped about by Chaos 2 in quite a memorable bow, to be fair. To be fair, it had, the axe wasn't too bad, the flipper wasn't too bad, the design was basic, and it did die after a few too many flips from Chaos 2, so yeah, like, I don't know, I'm going to have to put Stormforce in C. Because Stormforce wasn't completely dog shit, but it wasn't completely bad. Or should I put it in D? I'm going to put it in D. Because it's not C tier, it's just D tier. It's not a bad robot, it's just not great. Alright, so up next is Suicidal Tendencies. You probably can't see it now because this is just increasing and, yeah. I'm probably going to have to, like, edit this so it's better. But anyways, up next is Suicidal Tendencies. Suicidal Tendencies is wonderfully designed. You know, unfortunately, we only saw one fight of it. And for one that we saw, it was very functional. It was very powerful, very good robot. I'm going to put it in A tier. It's still a good robot. You know, it's still a really good robot. Shame we didn't get to see more of it. I'm going to put it right there. Something is next. Something lost to Widow's Revenge. You know, it is a scrappy robot. It's meant to be scrappy. And there's something lovable about something. Something... It's lovable. It's lovable. It's not functional. It's not, you know, got a great design. That's about it. You know, I like the scrappy design of something. It's just not very functional. Supernova is up next. Supernova looks really weird in its Series 5, guys, because it's a yellow robot. You know, I'm so used to the superhero looking Supernova, the one which has the Superman logo on it, which they got rid of in Series 8, which just sucked. But they did give us a cool design in Series 9. But I digress. Series 5's Supernova, you know, it's basically the same as the Supernova we see in Series 6 and 7, but yellow. That's about it. It's yellow. Its design is quite okay. You know, functionality, you know, it was decent. It just broke down. I'm going to put this in C just because we didn't see enough of it to make a proper judgment. So, you know, we do know that it does get better. We do know it gets better. So, you know, C, average. Yeah. T-Bone is next. T-Bone is Team Roman Robots' first appearance in the show. Because Team Roman Robots, they still do the Extreme Robots events. They still do all sorts of stuff with robots and what have you. If it wasn't for them, a lot of people wouldn't be into robot building. Let's you know, give them credit where credit's due. And to be fair, T-Bone in the qualifiers was meant to be a really powerful robot. Apparently, it shredded 2 robots apart, like destroyed them. There are pictures of these qualified battles, but it's just so far that you can't tell what's going on, which is a real shame. T-Bone, in terms of design, it's a unique design. The spinner, we know, is powerful, but we didn't see it in the show. And that's a bit of a red flag. The design is unique. I think the design is quite cool and fun. Like, I think under better circumstances, in a better fight, maybe it could have done better. But for what we're worth, you know, and for what we know from the qualifiers, I feel like T-Bone deserves to be in C because there is potential. There is something there that is a million times better. And, you know, if we saw that one, maybe. All right, so up next is Terahertz. Terahertz is in its debut appearance. Technically, it actually appeared in a video game first, which was Arenas of Destruction. Now, Terahertz is, well, it is a very powerful robot. Like, you see it, how it functions in its first battle against Ming. And Ming, you know, Ming just got kind of obliterated, then kind of got fucked over by Matilda, but still, you see how powerful it was there. And unfortunately, it was then up against Fluffy, where it was just had its sides ripped out, and of course that kind of helped it in the future to have better side protection, which is all good and jolly. So Terahertz, design wise, beautiful robot. Functionality, very functional. I think Terahertz is a great robot. Obviously we didn't get to see much of it, but I'm repeating myself here, but you just have the potential there. And, from what we see and what we do know, we know it's going to become a fantastic fucking robot. We know it's going to be a killer robot. Ironic because its previous entry was kilohertz. That was a bad joke. Anyways, up next is Tetanus. Now, Tetanus, I don't know whether it's you or me. I don't know. I don't know about you, but I really fucked up. I don't know about you, but have you ever seen, like, or do you remember, like, or maybe you use them still, like, girls, they have, like, hairband stuff, like these claw things. They're black, usually black and brown, and Tetanus looks like that. Like, I always thought when I was young and I saw, like, my mum's one, I thought to myself, it actually looks a bit like one of those. Like, I don't know what they're called. It's for long hair. I should know, I have long hair. But it looks like one of those. Like the things you put in your hair and you grab on like that. Hair shit. Tetanus is a very cool looking design. I like the big, bulky look. In terms of functionality, the design of it is, despite its coolness, is a bit weird because its functionality is like it lifts up the one like spike in the center to crush down other robots, but it's also a robot that breaks down if steam vents shoot up inside of it. It sounds really wrong, but like it really doesn't seem to be the most, how do I put it, most effective machine in the world. And that's a shame because I think the design is great. I think the design is there, the design philosophy and all that, but it just, I don't know, it just looks, its functionality seems a bit off. Like, I don't know. Anyways, up next is the Alien. The Alien, this is his first appearance. Now, the Alien, it's funny, I used to think the Alien was like a Heat finalist. It may have been a semi-finalist. But, you look at its history, it's only ever gotten to the second round, which is kind of naff, really, all things considered. But I think the design's great. I've actually seen the Alien in real life. I've seen quite a few of these robots in real life, but up close and personal, I've seen the Alien in, like, real life. I even took a selfie with it. I was lying right next to it. Probably very awkward for the people walking around, but still, I've seen the Alien. The Alien looks great. I think the little hammers that spin around at the back is great. I think the lifter as well, wonderful. Design-wise, looks brilliant. Unfortunately, we never really get to see much of the Alien because it always lost in the second round, and when it did, it always lost rather pathetically, all things considered. I think that, it has the potential to do well if it was in a different heat. It's one of those robots where, it's there. Its gloriousness is there. I think it's good. I think it's really good. It's going to be B. What isn't B tier is the Executioner. The Executioner. It actually tried to qualify in Series 4. It lost. There's pictures of what it looked like in Series 4 and how it was fighting PC Plod. So it could crush down, certainly. We never got to see that. It actually appeared in BattleBots as the Peacemaker, the Series 4 version. But overall, the Executioner, it's just, I don't know. I don't really like its design. It's too long for its own good. I feel like the Series 7 version went the right direction, making it more compact with a spinner. This one has like a scythe-like claw, which I guess is kind of cool, but yeah, design isn't good. The functionality is sort of alright if it was given the chance again. This is D tier. It's a robot which, like, it's going to be in the high end of D tier because it is a robot that we know can work, but, it's just, yeah. Thermidor is next. Now, Thermidor, this is where it has its bad luck streak really begin, because Thermidor in Series 3 got to the round 2, lost. It was a push bot, basically, lobster rambot. Series 4, really good, really powerful, really wonderful. Extreme 1, it still provided brilliant moments. But then the Annihilator came and you saw it, okay, it has some reliability problems. But hey, at least it survived the Flipper Frenzy. Series 5, unfortunately, really shows you some of the problems that Thermidor has. And these problems become consistent as, Series 6 comes around, where Thermidor can and will just break down, rather effortlessly. Which is a real shame, because I like Thermidor. And Thermidor here, it's weird, because one would argue, well, clearly the reason why they lost is because they haven't got the best, matchup. But here they were up against a robot they should have beaten, but they didn't, which was Prize Fighter. Prize Fighter was able to flip it about, and Thermidor struggled to flip itself over. Now, I don't know about you, but a robot that is not only a flipper bot, but also supposedly but not only that, is supposedly invertible, cannot self-right? That's a bit worrying. Don't you think that's a bit worrying? And I love the look of Thermidor. I think Thermidor can function, and it is functional. But Series 5's Thermidor, I don't know. Series 5's Thermidor, it was such a downgrade. And Series 6 Thermidor is a little bit worse, to be fair. But, yeah, I think because we did see it in Extreme, we know that Thermidor can function. I have a bad feeling I'm going to have to, shrink this even more. Yep. So, I'm going to put it in B tier just because we do see what its potential is. But unfortunately, we don't really see the potential there in Series 5 necessarily. And, this is the start of its real bad streak. All right, so up next is the Tartan Terror. Again, is this meant to be a joke bot or not? I'm going to say yes. And the reason why is because, look at the thing. It's a beer barrel. It's a beer barrel with a kilt. It's there not to win a fight. It's there to look pretty, be dumb, and die. That is its sole purpose in life. And it accomplished that against the Steel Avenger. The Titan Terror, I think it's a joke bot. I think it is a joke bot. Even if it isn't a joke bot, it's still going to be in the great design but poor functionality category. But at the same time, I just look at the thing. Just look at it. It's not to be taken seriously. If you think that's meant to be taken seriously, then I don't know. Okay, so up next is Tiberius. Tiberius is the next robot on the list. Tiberius 2, to be precise. Tiberius 1 was a very weird looking crusher. It looked like it had a sharp point, but its body was this big thing. Tiberius 2, it's more smaller body, bigger crusher. And the crusher looks more Razor-esque, I guess you could say, which I think works wonders. I think... Yeah, I think Tiberius 2 is a good-looking robot. I think, even when you see stuff from live events, Tiberius 2 looked like it was actually quite a good robot. It actually crushed Stinger, believe it or not. Actually wrapped its claw around the tire and actually crushed Stinger's tire, which is really impressive. Stinger, it's big wheels. It's big wheels, and it was able to wrap that claw around and kill it. So, Tiberius 2, it can function. We know it can function. We've seen it can function. Tiberius 2, I think it's a good robot. I think it's okay. I think it's okay, all things considered. I think, it was kind of unfortunate. It met Panic Attack in round 2. It was never going to win that. So maybe it could have if it was got a bit of grab in, but I don't know. I think under better heat, maybe Tiberius 2 could have done a lot more. I don't know. That's just me. I feel like this is another case of, in a better circumstance, it would have done better. And I do like it. I think it's a sexy robot as well. Tip Top is next. Tip Top. It's a spinner. It's a box spinner. Box with a spinner thing. It's slow as fuck. It was flipped out the arena in 10 seconds against Big Bro. Yeah, it's not good. It's not a good robot. It's maybe if it was fast, it would have worked. Maybe, but it's going to go in D tier because I don't think it's F tier necessarily. Yeah, it's not completely unforgivable. You know, maybe it could have worked. I don't know. Up next is Tornado, and Tornado, oh boy. Tornado lost in the second round. This is his worst performance in the show's history. It was very circumstantial, mind, because it was up against Dietor of all robots, and basically the fur got stagnant and it killed it. But we do know that Tornado in Extreme 1 was a fantastic robot. We know that Tornado in the first battle here against Gravedigger was also a really good robot. Tornado is a wonderful machine that can do really well. It didn't do very well in Series 5, but it, had it not lost to Dietor and it went up against Spawn again, I think it would have beaten Spawn again. And after that, it would have faced Razor. Now, depending on when it was filmed, it would have either used the anti-Razor frame or it would have not. And if it didn't, then Razor would have killed it. Yeah, the issue would have basically been the same. But if it had used it, then the whole course of robots would have changed. Like, Tornado is a fantastic robot. It's a beautiful robot, Really good robot. It may be a box on wheels, but it's a fucking fantastic box on wheels. It's up there in the third place category because it is deserving of it. So up next is Trouble and Strife. This is the debut of Team Forzy. They are the guys who make MR Speed Squared or Mr. Speed Squared, however the hell you're meant to pronounce that. And they have a powerful spinner here and a flipper. The flipper and spinner actually weren't too bad. I think the problem with this robot is, I guess it's its functionality, really. Like, the functionality of it was a bit off. It was very slow. I think the spinner was a bit too heavy for its own good. It was up against Wild Thing. Well, it actually caused a lot of damage to Wild Thing. And, the flipper was pretty good and spinner just tore into the wheels. So, Trouble and Strife isn't a bad robot. All things considered, it is not a bad robot. It is slow. That's his main downfall. But I think it's still a good robot, and I actually might even put it into B tier because it was a good robot. It just isn't a great robot. Up next is Twister. Now, Twister is by the same team that did Berserk. Berserk is a robot which I quite liked. I love the Series 3 Berserk in particular. Series 3 Berserk, fantastic robot. Series 4 Berserk was weaker and wasn't as good. Series 2's Berserk, the Super Heavyweight, was a fun first one. It was actually pretty decent. It used its lifter quite well. But the Series 3 one was marvellous. Then they decided to make Twister, which is a robot which I have no idea what the fuck it's meant to look like. Even these pictures are just odd. The weaponry, I have no idea how it's meant to work. It's useless. It died to a walker. Now tell me, how the fuck are you meant to enter a show where you die to a walker? A slow-moving walker. Yeah, that's Twister for you. Twister, man. The funny thing is they made a Pussycat ripoff in Series 6, which failed to qualify for me. Even if it won its qualify, I don't think it would have qualified for being a fucking ripoff, It's, yeah, like, whew, Twister. Twister. F dear. Velociripper's next. Now, Velociripper, I liked Velociripper in Series 3 and 4. I really do. Series 5 and Extreme 1's Velociripper has one massive flaw, and that's the fucking circular saw. The circular saw, it doesn't look good on Velociripper. Like, they could have just had it be a functionless, like, ramming blade, like it was. And I think it would have worked well. I think that would have worked much better than what we got. It's just, I don't know. I just don't really like the saw blade. The saw blade just annoys me. It annoys me. It's like with Robo Chicken in the sense that Robo Chicken, you know, it's the bulkiness that ruins it for me. With Velociraptor, it's the saw blade, but unfortunately, I can't even put in great functionality because it wasn't the best reliable robot in the world. In fact, it was quite unreliable. It was quite shit, actually. Yeah, so Velociraptor, not the best robot in the world. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to put in D tier. It's going to be like right at the top because I do like Velociraptor. But if I have to be objective about it, its functionality isn't great and its design is not the best either. Like, it just isn't. So up next is a Viper-01. So this is by the team who did Hard Cheese. Viper-01 was meant to qualify for Series 4. They had to replace it with Hard Cheese. A middleweight, which, you know what's going to happen. A middleweight against heavyweights is just not going to end well. Viper-01, it's just an ugly green wedge. It was slow. It didn't seem to do anything. It got pepper potted by Splinter of all robots. I'm going to put this in F tier. Like, honestly, Viper is not a good robot. It's not a good looking robot. It's not a cool robot. It's not anything really. Like, at least the ones above it, like Immortalis, Kryptonite, Rohog, and Twister, at least they had something. Yeah. All right, so up next is Warhog. And holy shit, Warhog. This was up against Napalm. I had the easiest free win you could imagine, and they blotched it because they are an unreliable mess. Warhog is a robot that is meant to be a full-body spinner. It's, you know, I do like the fact they gave it a war helmet this time, like an old like World War, helmet on Warhog this time. I think that looks so great. Compared to like the weird like Tasmanian Devil they had previously. That said, like, this is a good example, and I'm yawning. This is a good example of a robot which is great in design, but its functionality was so abysmal. Like, it is unreliable. It is an unreliable mess, and it just doesn't work. But its design is great. I'll give it that. Its design is really, really good. You know, I really love this design. I think it's a great design. It just doesn't function. Next up is Weedy Big Cheese. Not really much to say. Weedy Big Cheese always looked great. I love the large design of it. Reliability-wise, it's not the most reliable robot in the world. In fact, it's very unreliable. It's got a powerful flipper, and that's, for certain, the way it just throws robots into the air is fantastic. I love the logo. I've always loved the logo of the cat, like, jumping out. I don't know why. I just always love that. They replaced the silver spikes with black spikes now on the wheels. So yeah, I think this is an okay robot, all things considered. Weedy Big Cheese, I think I'm gonna put it in B tier because it is an A tier. I think the reliability problems are a bit too much. But actually, no, I'm going to put it in A tier. Fuck it, I'm going to put it in A tier because it, even despite the reliability problems, it was still functional enough that it was so good and it was still powerful. Like, the flipping power is amazing. Like, the Axel fight is infamous by this point. Almost everyone knows about the Axel fight. Wonderful machine. All right, so up next is Widow's Revenge. The wives of the girlfriends of Team Razor, although one of them was, two of them actually were like sisters to them, so that might be able to get creepy. But the opposites to Razor, Gillian Blood, funnily enough, she became Gillian Lewis. She would actually join Team Razor in Series 8 along with her daughter, and design-wise, this thing is not the best. I get, like, if you look on the top of it, you can tell that it's for breast cancer charity. This is a charitable robot. This is there more for charity than for anything. I don't think it's meant to be taken seriously, and I do commend it for what it's trying to do. it's not the most functional robot in the world, and it's not a joke bot either because, it's not treated as such, I don't think. Like, and it was there at the qualifiers. It was, fighting in them. And I think it was a serious entry to an extent. But again, like, I think, obviously it's more memorable for it being destroyed by Razor. Like, let's just be perfectly blunt about it. It's more remembered for that. I'm going to put it in the great functionality but poor design category because, all things considered, Widow's Revenge was very functional. It worked as intended. It did do the right thing. It just faced Razor and got mutilated. And Matilda, of course, helped with that mutilation. So up next is Wild Thing. Wild Thing. I love Wild Thing. I love the disc look of Wild Thing. I think it's quite an underrated look. A lot of people don't really like it. They like it when it's wedged or, like that. I like it with the disc. I think it looks good, even if the disc does get in the way sometimes. But it was still powerful. It's still able to survive fights. It was able to go all over the place. It's not as good as the Series 4 Wild Thing. The Series 4 Wild Thing was the best, in my opinion. But this Wild Thing is still good. Still really, really good. Still really entertaining. Still fantastic. It did have a controversial win against Prizefighter, which, a lot of people do think that Prizefighter probably should have won that, and I kind of agree. Maybe the unedited version didn't show as much flipping. I don't know. I felt like Wild Thing shouldn't have won that. But if we move aside from the controversy, Wild Thing is still a fantastic robot. I absolutely love it. One of my favorite robots, and for good reason. I also really used to love the what's it called? The mini-bot toy or Wild Thing. It was one of the few that actually had a functional spinner. So up next is Wolverine. Wolverine is interesting because it has quite a history. In Series 3, you can actually see it in the pits, and it was actually a reserve for that series. In Series 4, it failed to qualify. And in this series, it qualified, but was eliminated rather quickly. Unfortunately, it was... I quite like the design. The design is okay. It's not dreadful by any stretch of the imagination. I think it functions well. I think overall it's an okay robot. I think, all things considered, it works. All right, so up next is Wowot. Wowot, this is a good example of great design, but very ineffective. Wowot is not going to win many fights. Its design is fantastic. I love it. It's got this Diesel 10-esque claw, and it just goes down and picks things up. That's the idea. Unfortunately, it doesn't do that. It instead just kind of dies. But I give it credit for what it can do. And to be fair, it looked like it was a decent pusher. Wowot could push robots. And there is a fun fact about Wowot, and that is it was meant to have its teeth painted gold every time it won a fight. Unfortunately, it never won a fight. It never won a fight. Wowot, I like you. I like you a lot. You're a great design, but you're not effective at all. And up next, and the last one on the list, is Exterminator. Now, Exterminator's got a redesign from Extreme 1 and Series 4. It's no longer the box shape. It's now the more angled shape where they've sort of cut the robot slightly. So they've cut it diagonally almost. Exterminator, in terms of functionality, Exterminator functions well. They screw themselves over, though, by adding, shit to the front of their robot. In the Panic Attack fight, they added, a spike to it, which didn't work out well. They added a block against Corkscrew, which, of course, did not work out well either. But for what it's worth, I will give credit where credit to Exterminator does function. It functions well. And I like that. I like that Exterminator isn't a dreadful robot. I think it does work, and I think it works decently. Do I think there were improvements they could have made to Exterminator? Yeah, maybe not add shit to the front of your robots, But all things considered, Exterminator works well. It's not the best Exterminator, but it is still there. And I'm going to put it right where Willy McCheese and Beomoff is, because that's it. So, we've gone through Series 5. So, the best of the best is, of course, Razor. I think it's a fantastic robot. Pussycat, well, really good as well. It just had an unlucky run against, who was it? Firestorm. And Tornado, very unlucky against Dieto. The worst of the worst, because there is quite a few F tiers this time. Series 5 has a lot of D and F tiers. Quite surprisingly so. There's a lot of C tiers as well. Very more mixed ranged. But in terms of the worst, Juggernaut, easily the worst robot ever. One of the worst robots ever, indeed. Then you got Viper, which is just an ugly, block. Immortalis, at least, maybe the Halloween Mask and Scoop, but, no. Kryptonite, Rohog, and Twister, just all shit. What else to say? Loads of D tiers. The great functionality list has, of course, ones like Barbarus, Robochick, and Cat3. It actually has a lot of all-star robots in that category, which is quite surprising. Jokebots is quite a decent amount of Jokebots, and even if Tartan Terror isn't a joke bot, it'd still be in great design. In fact, all the joke bots would be in great design at the very least if they weren't considered joke bots, but I do think they're joke bots. There's a lot of average amount of robots. There's not a lot of high tier ones. Like Series 4, there's a lot of high tier ones. There's not a lot down below, but this time we've got a massively huge amount of mixed range robots, and I think the reason why is because Series 5 in general was a very mixed bag of a series. They brought back the head-to-heads, which why they couldn't do melees, no one knows. And I think, a lot of the fights weren't very interesting. A lot of the episodes weren't very good. It really is just, yeah. And when it was good, it's very few and far between. And I mentioned this earlier, the way they edited it, the way they formatted the show as well, where team interviews are just omitted absolutely, it kind of sucks. It does kind of suck. And I think, Series 5 in general is kind of a boring series. And you can tell this by the way the robots have been stylized here. Because if you were to cut this in half from B, A, and S, you got all these all-star robots in the B, A, and S tier. And then millions down below, which, compared to Series 4, where even the more average robots could still be in higher categories. This is almost inexcusable for me personally. I find this almost inexcusable, how bad they squandered the choices they made for some of these competitors. And maybe it's the head-to-heads that ruined it, because you look at Series 6, a lot of the more weaker robots, you still had something fun to remember from them. And Series 7 arguably did the same thing. I don't know, maybe the format was where it went wrong. But this is my personal opinion on the competitors of Series 5. Do you agree? Do you disagree? And I'll see you next time around.